Good evening. Please can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economy and Housing Policy Committee on Tuesday, 17th of September 2024 from the Walton Suite, Winchester, Guildhall. The time is 6:30 p.m. My name is Councillor Batho, Chairperson of the Committee. Some housekeeping points before we start. This meeting is recorded, live streamed, and will be available on the Council's YouTube channel. Can everyone please ensure mobile phones are on silent? Just a few seconds while I hear the rustle of... In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome everyone to this meeting this evening? So, turning to the agenda. Matthew, can I ask if we have any apologies and deputy members?
Good evening, Chair members. So we have apologies from Councillor Scott this evening, who's been replaced by Councillor Aaron. All the other members of the committee are present, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And are there any declarations of interest from members of the committee or other councillors attending? Thank you, Councillor White.
So on the agenda item 8, Winchester District Economy Review, on page 50, there's one bullet point that says allocate land for data centres to attract high-tech business. So I'm a director of a company that build data centres, so I'd just like to draw your attention to that. And if the discussion does cover that bullet point in detail, then I will leave the room for discussion.
Thank you, Councillor White. Any other members with interest to declare? Okay, thank you. If we can move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the appointment of a vice chair for the 2024-25 municipal year. Can I call for nominations, please?
I would like to nominate Councillor Chamberlain for the position.
Thank you, Councillor Atchwell. Do I have any other nominations? Okay. Can I have a second for?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Eve. I think as there are no other nominations, I'll ask Councillor Chamberlain to join me at the table. Thank you very much. Okay, and welcome, Councillor Chamberlain. There are no announcements for the chair for this particular meeting, so if we can move on to item 5, which are the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 20th of February 2024. Can I ask if these are agreed, please? Thank you. Okay, on item 6, public participation, we have both Councillors Cook and Horrell. Can I just ask whether you want to speak at this point or whether you speak at the particular items that you're interested in? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on now to the first item on the actual agenda. We have for this year a review of the Economy and Housing Policy Committee resolutions. So what the officers have kindly done is actually go back over the meetings that we've had in the last municipal year, and against both the housing and economy policy presentations to the committee in the last 12 months, is to note against those recommendations or the resolutions that we've made, that the actual sort of responses that the officers have made and the progress that those policies have made through the council. So what I'd like to do is to just have a look back at those policies and review them on the agenda, and ask if there are any questions from members about those that we could then ask of officers. If there are more depth of answers needed, then we'll ask that to be brought to a subsequent meeting. Okay, so if we can look at the first item, which refers to a meeting back in July of last year, where we had a presentation from, or two presentations from the housing team, which was looking at the retrofit housing programme and the carbon credit trading. Are there any comments on the responses that officers made in terms of the progress of those two papers through the municipal year last year? Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you, Chair. There are two questions, both are related to the retrofit housing program. The first one is we're looking at point number 1, committee resolution, that the council had set a challenging target to be carbon neutral by 2030. We all agree with that. The action taken is the council plan target, and I think something is missing over there. Somebody can clarify that. If you look at the spreadsheet, it says action taken, and the last sentence is the council plan target, and I don't know what that target is. Can we clarify that?
Okay. Apparently, Councillor Ashwell, there is an update. There is an update on the website. So if you accessed it prior to the meeting.
Okay, I see something different. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was identified and it had been reported back to Democratic Services.
All right. Okay.
So I
My
think
apologies then.
that's okay. No worries.
And the second
you have a
point.
second question, yes.
And the second point was on point number 3, committee comments. The impact of resident demand for window retrofits on project planning and bidding structure. The question is, did it really affect any of the activities, planned activities? And if it did, what was the impact?
Do you want to answer that?
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. It had no impact in relation to the work that was undertaken in the last financial year in relation to the window works that was already planned.
Councillor Chamberlain.
I just had a couple of points, both of you that may not directly be questions, just on retrofit housing programme. I think it fell under point 7. There's kind of a no against whether the comment was accepted. And I think the thing that didn't come through, I recall a discussion at the time. This relates to whether we could work with utility bill providers to sort of distribute communications at that point in time. I think the point we were trying to make, which I accept is a difficult one to implement, is what we will need through this is engagement of people living in the houses, and that could be a way to raise awareness on on the various benefits of undertaking this. I just thought I'd mention that because it didn't strictly speaking come through. And if I may, against point, let me get the numbers right here. So 6 it was, I think, the penultimate one that we've got listed here. I think we also expressed kind of a risk that sat alongside this, that again, if you're living in a house that is having some of the improvements undertaken, you may not want several visits being undertaken at different times, and therefore there's a risk of a lack of engagement on that front also. That was the only comments I had on this front.
Thank you, Councillor Chamberlain. Just in terms of the carbon credit trading scheme, Mr. Handy. Can you just clarify what the current council position is with this? It appears, it implies that that's not proceeding, but is that the case in terms of the response against item 6 on that particular report? Tripartite.
Sorry, Chair, can you just help, whereabouts are you referring to?
It's in.
Carbon credit
yes.
trading, yes. Any particular aspect of that?
It was just that point where it says during further investigation into other local authorities in the scheme, it suggests that the teams asked to be pause the investigations. So I was just clarifying the current sort of situation with the council. Is it progressing with that? So,
No, we're not.
Yeah,
We're not
okay.
progressing anything
Right.
further.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, so if we move on then to September, and sorry, Councillor Miller, sorry.
Sorry, on the retrofit question, the possibility of involving private homes and landlords in the project. I think the point I was trying to make at that point was if we're going in and fitting a house next door and clearing its asbestos, even if the house next door is private, should we not be talking to them so we actually use things efficiently? Because if we're going out and retrofitting one house and even next door is private, okay, we can't make them do it, but could we not offer it to make it a much more efficient service?
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, as the purpose of this exercise is to sort of just review the current status, and as I mentioned to Ms. Hendy, it's to help us to just clarify, you know, some of the points that were being made and reiterate them. So that's as I say the opportunity we're having as a committee at this point. Thank you. So in terms of the July meeting, the housing team brought us. The September meeting, we have the housing strategy and the nutrient mitigation project. So are there any points that councillors like to raise on those ones? No? Happy with the responses? Excellent, thank you. And in September, the economy team also brought the UK Shared Prosperity and Rural England Prosperity Funds, along with the Winchester City Street Market Management contract and operating policy. Any points of clarification or follow up on those ones? No? Excellent, thank you. So moving on to November, the housing team brought the housing revenue account, rent setting and business plan. That was it. Anything on that meeting for housing? No. And then in November as well, the economy team brought the festivals, events and programming policy. Any questions that members would like to ask against that particular policy that came through? Councillor Chevenix?
Just a quick one. A lot of the sort of action taken responses here allude to the next future review. Can we just get clarification as to when that would be, please?
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We haven't set a date for a formal review. This is a new policy and our intention is to work through the procedures, see how they work, get feedback, adapt, change if need be, almost as we go along. So it would be more of a sort of dynamic lessons learned, and we'll seek improvement as we go along, as this is something new. And then we'll probably look to review if we need to, you know, in a few years' time, but we haven't set a date for that.
Thank you. Just in terms of that, one of the areas that I think the committee was concerned about was about cost recovery and ensuring that the council was being adequately compensated for the cost of cleaning up and making good the locations, particularly for large events, say those that are held in the River Park area. So in terms of that, is there anything you can say to reassure the committee that the council is making sure that we actually recover those particular costs? Thank you.
Yes, Chair, we do recover those costs. So certain events obviously churn up the field more than others, and we do seek an agreement and recover costs to reimburse us on those. And we are also going to be looking at fees and charges coming up in the year ahead. So that's another opportunity to make sure that we've got the right costs in place and charges, etc. Thank you.
And one final one from me, in question point 3, there were some of the ward councillors, particularly I think those in the rural areas, wanting to be informed of feedback on local impacts on the festivals. It's been noted in the actions taken. I'm just wondering what process is going to be put in place to facilitate that communication with local councillors of events that might have a particular impact in their ward areas.
I haven't got any specific examples. However, if it's a large scale event, it does go through our safety advisory group, and they would expect that there would be consultation engagement with the local community about the festival or event that was taking place. I think if it was smaller scale, then our registering form provides that opportunity to also contact and provide relevant information for the parishes. But I think this is new, so we'll have to sort of work through how that is working. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the request there was that ward councillors were deliberately put into the process to allow that communication. So rather than it being adjunct to what some other process that might take place down line, that when a particular event or festival was being held and the feedback was being made, that the ward councillors were expressly involved in that and were made aware of the feedback. So if you could do that, that'd be great. Thank you very much.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we move on to the last meeting that we had, which was the February the 2024, and the housing team brought the accommodation strategy for homeless and the scoping document for the older persons accommodation strategy. Any comments that the members of the committee? Councillor Ashmore?
Curiosity. Thank you, Chair. The older person strategy we talked about then. Are there any dates set for it to bring it forward, or it is still under discussion?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Cabinet Committee on the 5th of November.
Councillor Chamberlain?
Thanks, Chair. Only to note that the vast majority of these actions are sort of tied to the papers being submitted for that Cabinet Committee on 5th of November, so I just think we should note that.
Thank you. Okay, so that was housing. The economy team also at that meeting brought the Winchester District Cultural Strategy and the Green Economic Development Strategy. So those last two papers or presentations, any final comments about the annual review from members at the moment? Thank you. Councillor Chairman.
Just one very brief one, and I apologise to Matthew immediately before this meeting for not spotting them sooner. It just appeared that there's an internal drafting note against item number 7 of the Green Economic Development Strategy Action Plan, where there's just a point made to address it towards the local plan team. So it just appeared there wasn't a full response against that one as yet.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. Just one question now that we've sort of got 6 months since this particular meeting. The partnership group that was being formed, has that now been formed? And if so, are the terms of reference being sort of agreed by it?
It's still emerging, it's still in development, and it's still in discussion. So they're coming together to create that partnership, but it is guided by the groups themselves. So we're waiting to see how that develops.
In terms of the overall strategy, is there a particular time by which you would hope that partnership group to have been formed and those terms of reference then available?
As I say, this is their partnership, so we'll be guided by them to some degree. However, I do understand that it is a commitment to have that considered within the first year of the action plan. So yeah.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, because I think at the meeting we were very much aware that this is something that's not necessarily within our full control. But nonetheless, I suppose we need to make sure that we've got some things, because at the end of the day, if it's our cultural strategy that's dependent upon it, then we need to make sure there's some progress and actually sort of movement forward on that. But no, thank you very much for those responses. And I'd like to thank the officers for the effort that's been put into giving us that response to those actions that and resolutions that we as a committee put forward last year. I think it gives a good opportunity for us to review that, but also then on record is the current position. So for those that were involved, it means that they've got that as a opportunity to reflect. For those that are new to the committee, it gives an opportunity to see what we've actually done in the last 12 months. And then going forward, there's at least a point of reference that they can actually look at in terms of where we were at the point we've started the committee from this year. So as I say, I'd like to thank Mr. Simon and the team for that. So thank you very much. So if we now move on to the next agenda item, because we've got a busy evening ahead of us. So we're now moving on to the Winchester District Economy Review. So this is actually now looking forward. So having looked back on the last 12 months, we're now going to look forward into the future. And look at what the economy is looking like at the moment in terms of how we want to plan against that. So Councillor Thompson, I'll hand over to you to introduce and then on to the team. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the committee for inviting us to come and present this review with you. I hope you've had a chance to look through the slides, because they contain some really fascinating information, and there's a lot of data in there that will obviously inform our position on various policy initiatives, etc., going forward. The particular slide that I wanted to flag up to you is the growth in population that we've seen across the district between, you know, the census data. There we are. It's just thank you, Sue, for popping that on the screen. The difference between the 2011 census and the 2021. We've obviously had quite you know, we've increased by almost just under 10%, 9.4%. And yet, if you look at the numbers of people within our district who are economically active, i.e. either seeking jobs or in jobs, that has decreased by a similar amount. And we all know that we have, you know, a real imbalance within the district. We've got an ageing population, and this really does just flag that up, I think, and it's something that we would love to be able to address. As I've said, there's lots and lots of really interesting data. On top of this, we also produce a quarterly, I think it is, dashboard. It is quarterly, isn't it? Which also gives a flavour of what's going on within the economy across our district, and that is always very useful to look at as well, and obviously brings a more up-to-date look at statistics, if you like, as to what's happening. So that's really my introduction. I'm going to hand over to Sue Robbins, who's going to take us through some of the slides. So over to you, Sue.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and good evening. So I am going to run through the presentation and give a flavour of some of the statistics and some of the things that it's telling us. As the Councillor said, there's a lot of detail there, and I'm not going to sort of dig into that. There is a lot more data that we could have examined as well. So this is very much a flavour and a feel and some of the key performance indicators that we would look at to understand how our economy is doing. But there is more information out there that we can obtain from the Office of National Statistics, which is the accredited provider of our statistics. And really the purpose of this review was to provide you with that high level data and that insight, to talk about some of the emerging policy and the changing landscape that we find ourselves in, and really to see how that can look at our priorities and how they're going to align with our existing and our future plans. And it'll be myself and my colleague, Professor Suzanne Dixon, who is going to take you through the presentation, and I'll hand over so that we do this in two parts. But we really want to have a clear idea of the priorities for the Winchester District, and a route and a pathway, if you will, for how we support as a council to enable and facilitate and improve those priorities. So slide please, Matthew. I won't go over the contents, hopefully you've seen all of that. And Councillor Thompson has kindly highlighted the population information, which you have seen before. I think it's probably been shared previously, but I think it gives a nice context, it's a nice opener for you know, who our residents are, if you will. So then taking a little bit of a deeper dive into employment, and as mentioned, we can see that the economic activity has slightly decreased, and you can see that economically active retired has gone up a little bit, which reflects the ageing population. We have a relatively low number of people claiming out of work benefits, and however, over half are in the age group 25 to 49. So there is definitely a clear group of people who are claiming out of work benefits. And you can see the profile there of that, how that's spread across the district. And apart from the town wards, which inevitably are a higher population, so a higher number of people, the others, even though they might show a higher percentage, we are talking about 100 or so people in those communities that are claiming out of work benefits, and they follow a similar profile of that age of 25 to 49, predominantly claiming those benefits. Thank you, Matthew. So then looking at our the makeup of where our jobs are and the types of jobs that the district has, I think you can see that we have got quite a mix. We still obviously have a strong number of jobs, a high number of jobs in the public sector, retail, technical and professional. So that really ranges from, you know, different ranges of jobs there, which can help guard against economic shocks in any one sector. And we have then the number of businesses in the area, and these don't always match in the fact that you might have some sectors like the public sector which has a few organisations but employ many people, and clearly then some of the perhaps technical organisations which are very small and as a consequence only employ a few people. So sometimes those two don't actually marry, but that's the driving reason behind that. So for occupation, thank you, Matthew. Occupations, we are very lucky to have some high quality educational institutions in our district, and our residents are highly qualified as well, and we perform and have consistently performed well on our qualification and skills levels. And we also have a high proportion of occupations which would be professional, managers, directors. However, on some of those, we're not actually performing quite as well as the UK. So although they're strong in our economy, they're not quite as strong as they are in the UK. Thank you, Matthew. So how might that affect earnings? We have the situation where our residents earn higher than our workforce. So the people who work here receive slightly less in earnings. And it can be seen just very slightly towards the 23 figure for the gross weekly earnings. That is just starting to slightly diverge, and so actually residents are starting to earn a little bit more than our workplace employees are. So I think that might be something to watch, and that's something that certainly will affect affordability and cost of living in the area. We do perform relatively well against the other local authorities in the county, and you can see that we are, so our residents do, and slightly, I think the only one, Hart might be the only one where the residents earn more than the Winchester district. But we are lucky that we have a relatively low number of workless households. So I think that certainly we are the lowest, if not the lowest, in the county for that. And I think that is a strength. Thank you. So how are people getting to the district? These are statistics from the workplace, the workplace statistics from the census. It is the latest information we have, and appreciate that this might be affected by the COVID and the change of working patterns at that time. I think this will be one again to monitor and watch over time to see if we can get any other data releases about people travelling to work. But you can see that there has obviously been a decrease in people coming by car, an increase in people home working. Thank you. So the next couple of slides just sort of then look at that in commuting, out commuting, and the change, and you can see clearly that we now are receiving quite a few less people coming into the district. And on the next slide, thank you, you can see that we also have fewer people leaving. The net change is that we still have people coming in. It's about 10,000 is the net change, 11,000 is the net change coming in to work in the district. Thank you. And I think this can be borne out on then our sort of economic performance and our job density. You can see, I've tried to highlight as best I can that Winchester is the red column, but it's the largest one, and it very much demonstrates that we have a high number of jobs per working age population. And I think clearly we've got in commuting, so there is, you can see how those two things are working together. With regard to the business counts, we've shown there the change, but I thought it might be just useful to have a little bit of information behind that, which is that the district has something just over 8,000 enterprises, and 82 odd% of those are actually micro enterprises, which is, you know, no employees to 9, and no employees means, you know, just one, you know, sole traders, that type of thing. So vast majority of our businesses are micro businesses. The statistics suggest that we only have 25 large enterprises, which are those employing over 250 people. I might investigate that, seems quite low, but you know, a large enterprise, we don't have that many. And we perform very strongly, as I say, with the number of jobs that we have per working age population here. Thank you. So next slide talks a little bit about then GVA, the gross value added, which is about the productivity of those businesses. And you can see that we have continued to grow. The chart below also shows the difference between us and the UK average, and you can see that that actually is narrowing. So we are growing and performing, but the UK would appear to be growing at slightly, their GVA growth seems to be slightly faster than ours. Thank you. Then wanted to just look a little bit about sort of high street performance. So going down a level just to look at some of the points that particularly get raised around our high street areas. And this information comes from the Winchester Business Improvement District barometer that they produce. And all of their copies of their barometers are available on their website if you wanted to look into more detail about the sorts of statistics that they include. We've just selected a couple of here, which is the vacancy rates and a sentiment score. And sentiment score is the business's view, assessment of their trading optimism. So 10 would be that they're very optimistic that trading is going to be good and strong. and obviously 0. So you can clearly see from this, for both vacancy rates and business sentiment, that the impact of the COVID and our sort of come back from that. Although you can see that obviously there's been a little bit of a wobble at the beginning of the year, and I think sort of cost of living, weather and other factors have affected how the high street might be performing. Vacancy rates are low. We perform very well in comparison to other high street areas. Too low vacancy rate is not necessarily always a good thing. You like to have a bit of churn, you like to have the opportunity for businesses to expand, to move into new premises. So it's always good to have a little bit of a vacancy rate there to allow that activity to take place. Okay, thank you. And then we talk about market towns here, but really I think this is more to say about the other high streets, the other employment centres, the other areas across the district there, and again they perform well with regards to their sort of high street vacancy. And I think Bishop's Waltham might have even improved a little bit. We understand that one of those 3 might be under offer, and we've just highlighted some of the bigger businesses that are in the area here. Clearly we know from the report that was done by the Local Enterprise Partnership back in 23 that actually the majority of enterprises are in our more what they call a rural economic area. So these are just some of the larger ones that we've highlighted, and I think it just demonstrates the range and variety of the businesses that we have across the district, but there will be many others that are micro and small businesses in a range of sectors right across the district. So that's the data highlight, but I thought it'd be quite useful to also share with you through the engagements that we have with businesses, the networks that we have, the contacts that we have with our businesses and groups, etc. I just thought it might be useful just to share some of the sentiment that and that sort of business intelligence that we're hearing about. You know, well, data is one thing. What's it actually like to work here and run a business here? And there'll be some things there which are typical of a well-performing economy, like it's difficult to retain and recruit staff. Others which are more external factors which are being faced by everyone, the cost of living and the squeeze on spending, rising costs of energy, the ability to access materials, etc. And then there's also geographical issues that are being faced, and I think there's comment there about the rural businesses clearly face difficulties around transport, digital connectivity, but interestingly also the opportunity to perhaps network and exchange ideas where they're more dispersed. So that's some of the business sentiment coming through. Thank you. So for me, this is my last slide, just to conclude and summarise all of that previous data and that information. And I think it really demonstrates that the economy of Winchester and its businesses and its residents is performing well. But as we've highlighted, or I've highlighted through, there might be just 1 or 2 areas we want to keep an eye on to make sure that that performance is sustained and improved. And I think that's where then I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Professor Suzanne Dixon, who's going to take us through some of those opportunities and some of that policy that can support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. So I'm going to talk to you now about the direction of travel and the opportunities that we found from our research and our investigations, and really how we've started that work already and where we are. So on this slide are the opportunities that we see. The green economy, we work very closely with our CNAP colleagues, and we have targets both in terms of industrial and commercial, solar and in carbon efficiencies that we're working to meet. So solar is a very big part of that work, and we're currently scoping large commercial and industrial buildings across the district to see where we might have an effect if we install solar on those buildings. We understand that there are gaps with green skills and those programs, and we're looking to deliver there, and digital skills as well. We want to increase those across the district, And we've been most successful in securing funding in that area. And that's why 2 of the programmes that we're about to launch are in the digital area. But equally, we are always looking at funding opportunities so that we can support right across the sectors. The visitor economy, as you know, we've just launched the cultural strategy. We're working very closely with them, and we've also launched a range of really successful carbon assessments, and they have been included to allow tourism businesses to apply for those. So to have an assessment on their business and see where carbon efficiencies might be made, and some of those have been followed up with green grants to help with installation. Creative is an area that we think and believe after our research will be a real opportunity for growth. So there are over 350 design companies, 300 film, TV and video companies in the area. And we're researching that further to see how we might support them and move that forward as a new area of growth across the district. In rural, we're working with colleagues at Sparsholt College, and we're looking at agritech and that growth, what is already available. It's very early days in this particular area, but we are looking to see how we can support that growth and support the rural economy through that. Next slide. So this review shows you the strengths and weaknesses from 2020 and how that has changed. So if we look at our strengths and the opportunities, we know that we've got a strong stock of assets and capabilities. We have opportunities to strengthen those anchor institutions moving into the district where we might pursue some of those digital createch or agritech ambitions. And if we look at the weaknesses, they're much the same as they were in the earlier review. So an aging population, a reduction in working age, high levels of in and out commuting that Sue has just addressed, and a reliance on public sector. Next slide. The new government policy is focusing on climate and carbon. So we are working towards that to ensure that we're aligned. So they're committed to growing cooperative and mutual sector businesses. They mention in their manifesto allocating land to deliver clean energy programmes. Skills England will bring together businesses, training providers and unions with national and local government to deliver a new industrial strategy. So we're waiting for more details there. And partnership with local level economic groups, with higher education, further education, third sector, unions and businesses across all sectors to create local and regional plans. We already have very close relationships with Hampshire County Council, which we're working to develop as we move forward. The LEP, which has moved into Hampshire and has become 2050. We are working closely with them, and the Growth Hub, which is still in place, to see how that will develop and what opportunities there will be there for us to work with them. If we go back to solar PV, there may be opportunities to have public sector trading companies where actually we're much more involved in those installations, and there may be a commercial benefit to those. And again, that's just at the very initial stages. And there are opportunities for green skills funding through Skills England. So we're looking at all of those, but particularly as well how we can interact and work more closely with universities to build research that then informs our future direction of travel. Next slide. So as I've said, the LEP has moved into Hampshire County Council and it's been replaced by a Hampshire Prosperity Partnership Board. We have representation on that board and we'll be working with them to see what the opportunities are there for us to be involved to drive economic growth in our district. We're working on our strategy moving forward together with Hampshire, who are refreshing their economic strategy because of the changes. The main themes are enterprise and sectors, employment and skills, productivity and growth, and innovation and investment. Next slide. So these are our priorities for 2025 to 2030. So it's about green businesses, growth and innovation. So not just rural, but trying to attract those businesses who are associated with rural, who are part of that pipeline, if you like, so that we can build an ecosystem around that. To increase business investment in small-scale renewable energy generation, to reduce travel and commuting, and maximise our opportunities from regeneration programmes. And our key sectors are rural-based businesses, the rural economy, the sustainable visitor culture, and retail and the high street. So already in rural, we have those digital skills opportunities that we're about to launch, and they will be offered to businesses across the district, but we're particularly targeting those areas where we know there is most need. And we aim to build on our skills and academic strengths with 2 universities and the 3 colleges. And one of the important things there is about retaining talent. So how do we hold on to those graduates so that they stay in the region and we can start to build this ecosystem across these different sectors and progress. Next slide. Now I'm going to hand back to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Yes, next steps. Obviously, we'd like to hear from the committee, their views on what you've been presented with today. You know that our council plan is coming to the end of its life and we are looking to produce a new council plan for the next 5 years, going up to 2030. And obviously, what you've heard today will inform what goes in that council plan. So we are going to use the priorities that Suzanne and Sue have talked about to inform the targeting of our work streams and our any funding programmes, influence and inform the current and future GEDS action plans, because we've got a GEDS action plan which we updated I think November time. I think the committee looked at it, and obviously the main point is informing the next council plan. As Suzanne said, we do take part in Hampshire's economic strategy and the Hampshire Prosperity Board. And obviously we want to, the evidence that we've gathered here, together with other evidence that is more up to date, is the evidence we need to support funding bids. And that's really important because obviously as our finances as a council are squeezed, and so are many of the partners that we work with too. But it's important that we are able to have the evidence ready to provide to support a funding bid should a pot of money become available. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. And Sue and Suzanne, thank you for your presentation and contribution. And as you say, Councillor Thompson, it is quite fortuitous that a further part of our agenda is actually to talk about the council plan. So we actually do have the opportunity of having it fresh in our memory, or at least this aspect of it, at least when we come to that agenda item. But I'd like now to open it to members for questions. If you'd like to, Councillor White.
So we're being asked to support the council's business as usual approach to develop the green economy. And I just wanted to clarify what that actually means, what the business as usual phrase means. Also, regarding the sector opportunities, I just wondered how we're measuring the green impact, like how are we measuring projected carbon savings for businesses? Is there a way of measuring that at all, or the impact of the green development plan? I'll stop there for now.
So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. With regard to the business as usual, I think we were trying to express there that we had brought the Green Economic Development Strategy. We have a number of plans in place, and this is the evidence base that allows us to continue along that route, if you will. So it wasn't suggesting a new range of activities. It wasn't suggesting that we divert from that. It was almost that this was reinforcing that we were on the right track with those business plans, although obviously there are things that we can always tweak and learn and improve. I think that's what we meant by business as usual rather than a radical new programme that we're proposing. I think with regard then to how we capture the carbon impact of the activities of those sort of sector opportunities, we do that at several levels. If we are funding a programme or we're working with a business, we would want them to capture the actual carbon from that perhaps investment. So for example, if it is solar PV, we would expect that to be included as a performance indicator in the work that we have with them. We would then perhaps also look at modelling some of that information if we were working at a slightly more macro level, and then we look at the data that's produced by government each year that says what our industrial, commercial, public sector carbon out emissions are for the whole district. So it's sort of like, as best we can, we do it at a targeted level, but then also at a very high level to understand whether the impact is having any effect on that overall emissions data.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
With a few, if possible, please. One of the things that's come out is retrofitting and how important that is. But what are we going to do to encourage the skills that we need for people to be trained to do the retrofitting we need, not only for our stock, but lots of the old houses? I mean, is that an area we can concentrate on training people for? Because we don't seem to have sufficient resources to cope with what the demand is currently. Secondly, have we identified enough sites across the district for employment? The only major one we seem to have is Bushfield site. Most of the houses under the local plan are in fact out of the city, and at this rate we're going to end up with lots of people travelling, which goes against the idea of being greener. And how are we going to allocate land to databases if effectively we've only got land at Bushfield site of any significant employment? So we seem to be concentrating on the would-be jobs in Winchester, and the rest of the district seems to be left totally ignored about how we're going to get a strategy out there and provide sites for people to work. And how do we encourage people to spend longer in Winchester when they're here? How do we get visitors to spend an extra night and spend more money? Would be my questions about where does our plan do and how does it fit in with those sort of targets, please?
So thank you for your question. I'll take the first one about retrofit. So we are in the process of, we're about to launch a retrofit training academy in conjunction with Hampshire County Council, where we'll be delivering exactly what you've outlined there. And we hope the take up will be substantial, and it will put us in the first steps really to delivering this type of programme.
I can add to that as well, that through the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, we have funded Sparshot College to put in training bays for retrofit skills as well. So that's actual facilities that are going to be available for people to either skill up or reskill into as well. So we're finding various routes through to that. So we do recognise that that is something that we want to support. With regards to employment sites, I don't have that information. I think that is where we have worked with our local plan colleagues. The local plan has been published. They have done evidence bases. So I'm not going to comment on that at this point. For the visitor spend, we work very hard with our attractions partnerships, with our accommodation, with our the sector as a whole, with the bid and with the high streets, to make sure that we're finding every opportunity to promote itineraries for staying here longer, for dwelling here longer, for travelling, for staying, doing multiple things. So it's not just seen as a come for a morning. There's many more things you can do as part of a wide range of a longer stay. So we do that through our tourism marketing, working with the attractions, working with our accommodation, through our website, social media, and all of those sorts of activities, so that we can ensure people stay here for longer. And that helps with sustainability as well, because they're not, coming in and out, and they're spending more when they're here.
Thank you, but I still have the queries. Where are the jobs going to be? We don't have the employment sites in the local plan. There just aren't the sites in the rural areas where we put the houses. So how do we create jobs where people are going to be living?
I can't comment. I'm not going to comment on the local plan side of things.
I'm sorry.
However, could I just say that not all growth has to increase floor space. We can increase jobs within the 4 floor prints that we have, working with businesses to be more productive, look at different activities and how they can diversify. So I think there is opportunity for growth even within the fabric that we have.
Councillor Todd, sir.
I think the other thing to be aware of is that conventional office space usage is shrinking at the moment, and so actually a lot of existing employment space, or rather sites, are available for reapplication. The second thing to say is, of course, people don't decide to live and work in one district. So where are the employment space for the people living in west of Waterlooville? Where's the employment space for people living in North Whiteley? So, I mean, there are, people do look across borders as well. I do take your point. We have done a full assessment, but one of the things that it includes is the fact that, firstly, we do have quite a lot of allocations already in the plan that are carrying over. But secondly, there will be opportunities to repurpose existing employment site as working patterns have changed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chamberlain, please.
Thank you, Chair. I asked my question in the context, we're being asked to provide our comment on sort of the target and the focus of the approach. In reviewing this pack, I was kind of in particular drawn to page 47, sort of talking to market towns, which I think to some extent sits alongside Councillor Miller's question. So I look at the information presented on this slide, picking Wickham as an example. There is one company here that no doubt is registered, I guess, on Companies House within that market town, and I've no doubt is one of the highest business rate payers. But in reality, their offices and their employment is elsewhere in the district. So I struggle to look at this slide as kind of a reflection of should we say, economic activity in the locality, just simply based on my knowledge of the area. The other thing that jumps out on this slide, which you highlighted on, is kind of the reliance of sort of public sector activities across the market towns that are on this slide. So in the context of the question will be asked, whether the target and the focus, of the approach is correct. I guess my question is, are we confident in the data that we have in the market towns and the rural areas that are within our district, and therefore do we think we're giving them enough priority in the measures that we're setting forward?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we've probably done the market towns and other employment areas a disservice in the fact that we have got a detailed report on the rural economy, the rural economic areas, and that was produced for a collaboration between ourselves, Test Valley and East Hants District Council, with support from the Local Enterprise Partnership as was, and that clearly demonstrates that the rural economy area in Winchester performs very well. It's got a lot of businesses in it, got a lot of employment in it, and I think we haven't perhaps conveyed that well enough with this brief slide on the rural area and the mix and the diversity of businesses there. So there will be clearly a large number of land-based rural businesses. It is predominant, I think 2% of the area is actually given over to development, and so that's the industry and the commerce. The rest is agricultural, but in that area there is a lot of industry and a lot of employment going on. It's just dispersed, so I think we do have better data than what we've conveyed here. So I think we need to perhaps, if we can, I'll confirm whether we can share that data, but we do have more.
Councillor White, please.
So it kind of leads on from what you've just been talking about market towns and high streets, and there's a possible opportunity regarding the new government and the possibility of business rates being more devolved to local authorities, and the idea being that it will level the playing field for local independent businesses against people, big online retailers, people buying online. So I just wondered if that had been considered at all for your sort of future ideas on business rates.
I know that the Winchester bid are very interested in the business rates and how that's structured, and as you say, the sort of the level playing field and what sort of schemes would be better and fairer for business, for the retail sector. I think driven primarily by the online issue to some degree. I can't say what the council position is on business.
Yes, I think that's probably something that we can only wait for the announcements in October. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the government set the business rates. We don't have any say in that, and although we do retain a percentage of the business rates, it's not down to us how much we retain or otherwise. And the government, we don't know which way they're going to go on that, I suppose, is all I can say.
Yes.
Yeah.
A plan that's based on the idea that the government's going to write checks or give greater freedoms to local government is probably not a very strong plan. It would be great if it would happen. And in general, any plan that gives us more say over how money is collected, how it's spent, how we can adjust to the needs of our local economy is a plan that we will support. But I will believe it when I see it. And I don't think it's prudent to start planning on the basis of rumours, because unfortunately it's the kind of initiative that will probably not survive contact with the Treasury.
Thank you. Councillor Atchwell, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of questions in this. First of all, it's really interesting to see the data that you have presented to us, 1921 and 1911 data. Couple of things that come out is the population growth and also the age group that's happening. Now, the model in which the city works is changing. The internet means that the retail sector is going to wind down slowly. So it's right and proper that we have included in our plan to educate, to train the population, particularly in the IT literate area, because the middle-aged population is the one where we will probably need to focus on, and I'm sure that is what you have covered in your area. And that's very good, really. I thought that would be an issue which we need to tackle. The second one is the solar panels that you talked about. Now, in Whiteley particularly, I notice there are lots of offices, but these are owned not by Winchester City Council. Obviously, there are various other owners. How will we persuade them to adopt the policy of solar panels? I don't know, but I'm sure you must have some thoughts on that. And the third one is about the how can we introduce hydrocarbon-free heating systems? All these offices in Whiteley use today either electrical heating or gas heating. Can we insist, or can we organize something as our plan probably to convert them into something which is feasible? Thank you.
I think we're going to do a double act on this one, if I may, Councillor, in response. So I think with the retail sector and the online and the training and the digital, I think my colleague Susanna has highlighted that we are looking at digital skills for our residents. We also know that actually our independents, where they offer a high quality experience in shop, they are still performing well against the online retailers. So we are somewhat blessed by the fact that we have great smaller independent businesses, and I think that's somewhat helped us be resilient to the COVID impacts and some of those other shocks. So I think where we can have our businesses provide that quality service is as important as the digital skills. They still need social media presence and all that, totally understand that, but we are looking at skills for residents as well as the green skills for professionals. And then I'm going to hand over around the solar panels to Suzanne.
So just to reinforce the discussion there on the residential digital skills, we have just appointed someone to deliver a programme of that, exactly that for us, and that will begin in the next couple of weeks. And we hope then that we will get a good response and we can start to work with residents. So we were very pleased to secure funding for that. For the solar panels, we've started by looking at commercial and industrial. My colleagues in CNAP are looking at domestic, but we're working very closely together. But I have to say, in the discussions and the meetings that we have had, we have been really pleasantly surprised by the level of enthusiasm for it. So from that, we conclude at the moment that could be quite a strong impact on the target efficiencies we've been set. Coming on to the carbon-free heating systems, we've already offered a range of carbon assessments to businesses across the district. We're now in our third phase of those. We're just finishing them again, but there we go out, or the firm that we've appointed goes out, and it carries out a full assessment of the business and what might be possible. And in the early stages, in rounds 1 and 2, we were able to follow up sometimes with a green grant that then helped with the implementation.
Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Hello, two questions, or maybe a question and a sort of an expression. The first one is on the Winchester High Street performance, which I found very sort of reassuring. I just want to check that the same sort of data is being collected for the retail areas on the edges of the city, such as in Week, Harestock, and like the retail park in Winnell, and that they have the same sort of levels of vacancy rates and business confidences as those in the city centre, because it would be of concern if that information wasn't being picked up. And the second is just, it's put down as an opportunity that we have 2 universities. And my worry with that is just that we are maybe sort of relying on future government education, higher education policy for our economy, and that may be an opportunity, but also may possibly be a weakness as well, and something to guard against. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. With regards to the high street data, that does only cover the Winchester bid district, so the area that they work over, so it won't expand out further across the city. So we won't have that level of information for those other areas that you spoke about. It's a survey just for the city area, and we can certainly in the SWOT analysis give some consideration to the implications of higher education, both as a positive and as possibly a weakness. But we certainly see it as a strength in the academic research, in the people that are coming out of it, wanting to retain them. There's many aspects of the universities that we feel that we can benefit from that perhaps we haven't been as much in the past.
Councillor White.
So leading on from the universities, I mean, you could train all these people in green skills or creative skills, but how are you making sure there's the career pathway into working in Winchester rather than, you know, being educated here and then going somewhere else? And anecdotally, with the sort of creative skills or people coming out of university with creative degrees, they have to go to London or Bristol to actually get a job in that area. So just wondered what links you're making.
So I think there are opportunities to retain that talent in the universities across the district. If we look at incubation and acceleration, and we work with partners so that we can help those young people start up their own businesses. Most creatives start out by freelancing initially. Very rarely do they go straight into a profession. There's usually a 6-month lag on them getting that job, so they need support. So one of the things that we may investigate would be looking at spaces where we could have an input where that young talent can be grown, not just for the students, but also those spaces work really well where you bring members of the community in as well, and you have them working together and you develop a network in effect. And we believe that could be very successful.
Yes, and if I could just chip in here, because this is a subject very dear to my heart, the retention of our creative youngsters who, you know, have learnt so much during their years at university here. First of all, to say we do have excellent relationships with both of the universities who are involved in the creative industries. And one of the, as you've highlighted, one of the problems is that we have very little sort of start-up space in the district, really, for those kind of industries to sort of fledgling industries to get going. But we do have a number of opportunities coming up. We have the New Street Markets contract, for instance, and I know that Southampton University or Southampton School of Art are very, very keen that when we do have the new market contract in place, that we do actually deliver a sort of young person's market, if you like, because obviously having a street stall, you don't have the overheads that you do if you've got a premises. And every time I see this particular person from Southampton University, she asks me, how are you doing on that market contract? Because we really want to, you know, our students are champing at the bit to have somewhere to sell their, you know, the things that they make. So I think there are opportunities going forward, and obviously collaboration and partnership working with the universities is really, really crucial to this, because as Suzanne said, you know, we're looking for incubator space as well, and, you know, possibly the universities have the answer to that. So I think there are things that we can do to help.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair. In reviewing the papers, I was kind of, when I got to the SWOT review on page 51, I was almost expecting to see kind of a threat or a risk around market towns and rural areas being dependent on a relatively small number of large businesses in the area. And I was just curious for your view on that. Is that a sentiment you share, or have you seen data that would suggest or incline otherwise?
We don't have the level of information that perhaps goes down to those individual areas as to the businesses there. We know that the rural economy, as I mentioned before, is strong, has a number of dispersed businesses. We know that the profile of the businesses in the district are micro. So I think there is always a dependency on large employers, and that can create an economic shock if they close. But if you look at the wider, sort of more macro level information, it's not indicating that there are sort of structural weaknesses there in that regard. But unfortunately, the data doesn't go down to that level of granularity. So we've sort of tried to get various sources of information to get to that level of detail. The dependence on large businesses is a risk in an economic, in an economy. So that would be, we've put it there as a weakness. Perhaps it could be there as a threat then as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Just I suppose an observation. Yes, obviously, large businesses are a threat in that obviously they have a single point of failure if they are to move or to fail themselves. But at least in terms of supporting them, that they have got sort of an area that of expertise, or an area that they will sort of can identify. You can identify easily how to support them. I think with the range of micro businesses that we have, it's understanding what sort of support they could have, because they are so diverse that it's difficult to know how to then support them. Have you got any thoughts about sort of how we could how we can go about supporting the majority of the businesses which are in that category? Thank you.
We would rely on partners to a great degree on that, with the Growth Hub, with Hampshire County Council, and some of the programmes that they would be bringing forward. Some of the new policy that might be coming out might provide opportunities, but we tend to think more like focus and target and identifying where we want to intervene than a sort of universal business support for all small businesses. There's the Chamber of Commerce, there's the Federation of Small Business. We would work with colleagues like that who are best placed and closest to those organisations about the sorts of support that they offer in networking, advice, guidance, etc. So I think we would rely on partners and working with them for that type of support.
Thank you. And one final question. We obviously touched on graduate retention and how we sort of make sure students who have gone through university here actually stay here, and touched on the sort of economic aspects of how that can be done through Incu hubs and startup spaces. Are there any other aspects that we need to think about? And I'm thinking here particularly maybe of the wider council plan in terms of what support those graduates need to stay within the Winchester district area. Thank you.
So I think one thing to consider there would be housing, affordable housing for them to stay, either in the short term or the slightly longer term. But that's certainly a factor in why they don't stay and they return home.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, was there anything further you wanted to add before we move into debate?
No, I think we've had a really good session and lots of questions and things to go away and think about. Certainly some of the areas are also sort of dovetail into the cultural strategy, which where I haven't actually mentioned yet, but certainly in terms of bringing in those creative minds and retaining them. It's one of the strands of work we have going on via the cultural strategy too, and looking at premises in perhaps a different way. So trying to think about unusual premises, if you like, or premises that aren't necessarily being used 24/7. You know, businesses often operate on a 9 to 5 basis, and then their offices, you know, everybody goes home, the office is empty. Could that be used for some other activity? And that's all in the melting pot at the moment. So I think there's quite a lot that is exciting actually to look forward to. But thank you very much for all your comments.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. So if we move into debate then, has anybody got any items that they'd like to focus on for debate?
Thank you, Chair. Now, looking at the data from 2011 and 2021, yes, the pandemic did affect the information that you had, but it's a point in time, and obviously over a period of time that we would have new data which will in fact confirm what you are planning for in terms of next 5 years. The strengths and the weaknesses that you pointed out, I think I agree with them, all of them. Perhaps one more, I could say the strength is the Winchester has a historical place, not just the Winchester, but the district. There are lots of things in here which will attract people. And I know for sure in Bishop Waltham, for example, or New Alresford, people come in from all over the place to see that. So that is a definite advantage of strength for the Winchester district to get the businesses here for sure. What you have planned for in terms of the helping out the creative part of the business, helping the farming area, because 70% of our land or the population is in the farming, not 70% of the population, 30% of the population is in farming. And if we can get them also AI literate, I think we will have higher efficiency in terms of production and probably even better retention of people, because we need people in farming. And these days, I think lots of farmers are giving up because they don't have the efficient way of doing it. And if we can train them using the artificial intelligence, I think that's a perfect thing to do. So what you have planned, I think it covers what I had in mind, and I will fully support that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White.
So we hadn't really talked in the questions about the farming and rural aspect, and so I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I really think it's about sustainable local food. So I think that has a threefold benefit. Obviously, future food security, local jobs, and reducing travel to supermarkets. If you've got local food, we're surrounded by farms in the Meon Valley, but we have to travel miles to the shops. So if we can focus on rural areas, local food, just one comment.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Yes, to express the Luddite point of view about the opportunity of allocating land to data centres. My understanding is these are sort of warehouses full of computer servers, which are quite energy and water intensive, and that any sort of push towards those will be a trade-off or a compromise with our wishes for a green economy, because the two things are not necessarily, mutually consistent. Thank you.
Councillor Chamberlain, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was kind of intrigued about the sort of the data that we had on the market towns from rural areas. So, noting that we're being asked here to look at the target and the focus that's being proposed within the approach, supportive of it, and reassured by the answers from officers on the data that we hold on the market towns and rural areas, and we just ask that we keep an eye on that, because I suspect there's a degree of volatility in those areas going forward, which, as we've discussed, could be a risk.
Thank you. I'd just like to add my thanks to the officers for again working in a very difficult area where there's a lot of small businesses and therefore a lot of data that needs to be sort of worked through. But I think encouraging skills and skills in retrofit and digital is going to be clearly an aspect that both in terms of the climate emergency and the emerging sort of areas of business is going to be key in terms of the future for our district. And I think focusing on the rural areas and the areas outside of Winchester and ensuring that we have a good understanding of what the data is showing for those is going to be quite key as well. Because 70, I think in the report it said 75% of the population, sort of live in that area, so it's a significant part of the district. So, echoing what Councillor Chamberlain was saying, I think we need to make sure that we are understanding that level of detail in a bit more sort of a bit more detail, so that we don't sort of overlook that important part of the district. But thank you very much for that presentation. So in terms of the sort of resolutions, I think reflecting back, then we're very supportive of the work in terms of the skills, particularly in retrofit and in terms of the support for digital. I think in terms of the rural areas, we just like to make sure that that is kept a focus, and that we have maybe a bit more detail, a bit more understanding of how those businesses are operating, and some of the other areas of support that they might need within that. Very encouraged by the work in the solar area, working with businesses both in terms of commercial implementation and the conversion of gas and the assessments that are being made of those. So obviously in supporting our direction of greener, faster, that is an area that is really sort of key in terms of improving the performance of our district. So thank you very much for that. And then referring back to our recommendation, just to repeat that we're being asked to note the contents of this presentation and provide any comments, which we've done, and just to say that we been asked to using those priorities, so we're asking to support using the proposed priorities to target and focus our approach to achieving the best economic outcomes for the district, and that the business as usual approach for delivering green economic growth from the council's work. So I think, are we looking for a vote on that, Matthew, or is that just fine? Okay, right. Thank you all very much for your contribution to that paper. Thank you to Councillor Thompson, Sue Robbins and Suzanne Dixon. So thank you very much for your time this evening. Thank you very much. And in the interest of time, if we can move on quickly, I'm sure those that are still waiting to present would like that. If I can ask for us to move on to the housing repairs and maintenance contract procurement. This is a presentation, and if I can ask for Councillor Westwood to introduce. Thank you.
Okay, to proceed?
Yes, Councillor Westwood. I think just before you start, we have contributions from two councillors at the back. Do you mind if Councillor Westwood presents first, and then you can do your question then? So thank you very much.
That will probably be helpful as well to do it that way round. Thank you. Okay. Right, thank you for the opportunity to bring this to this particular committee. The repairs and maintenance contract with Cardo has run for around 13 years, but much has changed in that time, and it is right to review again our requirements and understand who we can best work with to deliver to those requirements. However, we should also recognise that we are looking to improve from a good base, with our most recent survey showing 80% of our tenants are satisfied with our repairs and maintenance service, and 78% happy with the timeliness of our service, but we can do better. I want Winchester City Council housing to be more easy to do business with. This can mean different things to different people, and you will hear shortly how we have consulted to understand what that means to many different groups. There are a number of key outcomes we want to see. We want a partner, not a supplier. Whoever we choose going forwards will represent Winchester City Council in our tenants' homes, and they should meet and deliver to our values. Improved customer service and experience, including a strong digital offering and continuous customer feedback at all interactions. Improved quality of service, right first time, every time. Transparency and visibility, both for our tenants and importantly, internally, so we can manage the operational processes and manage the contract effectively. Reduced cost of repair, delivering value for money to the council and to our tenants. Continuous innovation to constantly improve our service and drive further value and further value for money. The opportunity to expand the service beyond just a repairs and maintenance to possibly cover planned upgrades, retrofit activity, decarbonisation of our housing stock, voids refresh, and any other service that may be identified in the future. This contract is one of the most important and valuable contracts in the council, and we are here today to seek your feedback on the work completed to date to inform our actions as we take this procurement process forward over the next 18 to 24 months. The team are good, but we value your input to improve the procurement approach further. Finally, I'd like to welcome Yvonne to her first Business and Housing Policy Committee. Welcome, Yvonne. And to, after questions from the councillors behind me, to hand over to Simon and Yvonne, who will take us through the summary slides we've prepared before we open for questions and debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Westwood, and glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
Right. If I could ask Councillor Cook to. That's fine. If you've worked it out between you, no problem. Thank you very much. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, good evening, and thank you for allowing me to address the meeting. Can I say, firstly, well done to the officer team for the research and workshops that they have initiated to inform this selection process. It's really helpful to have that background understanding. And thank you for the presentation today, sharing your thoughts on the procurement at this key contract as far as you understand it at this time. I'd like to share with the Policy Committee that there might be 4 or 5 suggestions that we input to the officer team before the procurement commences. And if I may, I'd like to share them with you. The first is a contract without a break for 10 years. We've heard already this evening just how the world is changing quite significantly, and there may be new things we want to recommend in 5 or 7 years. So I'm questioning whether it would not be more flexible to have a contract that allows a full review, not just the open review indicated in the presentation. And I may be misunderstanding the nature of that, but I'd like to understand whether we can secure a level of flexibility over the 10 years. Secondly, do we really want to put all of our eggs in one basket? A contract over 10 years with the potential not only for the standard repairs but retrofit investment of 40 million is very significant for this council. Have we investigated further the option listed of more contractors, and why have we stepped away from that and gone with the main contractor proposal? A question about the preparation of the documents for the procurement process. We currently don't understand our repairs requirement. We've talked about it long and hard for many months. And I know very well we are investigating this. But do we have the data yet? And if not, how is this plugged into the contract process as we proceed so that we ensure we have the best possible information to get the best contract going forward? Can we build into the contract a commitment to apprenticeships and local job opportunities? We've heard a lot this evening in the prior discussion about employment and where people are going to live in the houses that we're due to build. How can we ensure we help drive job opportunities locally as part of this very significant council investment, a very significant contract that we have? And finally, something dear to my heart, what social value are we expecting from this contract? We've declared that we want 10% for social value and environmental, but what is in our mind and what should we be asking the officers to negotiate on our behalf? I hope those points are helpful, Chair, and that they can be fed into the discussion as officers proceed with this important piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Orrell, and I think they'll accord with many of the questions that you will hear later on in the debate, so discussion. So thank you very much. And Councillor Cook. No, you can't have the extra left over.
Good evening, one and all. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for allowing me to address the committee this evening. I'd like to go back to the early part of September where I actually attended a scrutiny meeting. Now, you may sit here, be scratching your head and thinking, why am I talking about a scrutiny meeting? But it was reference to housing. I asked a number of questions at that meeting and sadly, they weren't all answered. So on the 6th of September, I sent an email to various officers and councillors as well. Today's the 17th. I've had no answers to those questions. But some of the questions I've seen from tonight's presentation have actually been answered. Reference the exact figures of the residents that actually took part in the survey that you've very well done. And I'd like to remind you of a question that I asked, and I did get a reply to that on the evening of scrutiny. And that question was answered by our strategic director, Simon Hendy. And that was, does WCC have a member of the team that goes out and checks work before invoices are paid? And the reply I got was no. I was shocked, I have to say, but we will be getting one in October. So for some considerable years, probably 8, 9, 10 years, invoices come in and nobody checks that work, which really concerns me. I'm still actually struggling with an overspend of £2 million. And here we are talking about procurement of new company. Could be the same, who knows? I'm still trying to understand that. Now let's talk about procurement. Osborne's, who are now, as we know, Cardo, correct me if I'm wrong, and they've been involved with the council since 2011. And CCS were procured in 2021, but both contracts finish in 2026. I'm assuming you had like a roll on with Osborne stroke Cardo. Was that something to do with our friend, the word COVID? Now, let's talk about the workshops. Only 17 residents actually attended. Now, 135, according to the representation here this evening, did show an interest. But it wasn't until the morning of the actual workshops that they were sent a reminder. My question is, why weren't those residents, those 135 that showed an interest, why weren't they contacted a week before or even, and then again the night before? But to be contacted on the morning, that's not particularly good, especially if someone has a busy diary. Appointed provider would manage scheduling and policy. That's the heading for the repair hub. That concerns me. And then I saw in the presentation, pleased to read that you may be looking to locate that appointed provider in the housing team, actually in the Winchester City office. I would be really worried if they were elsewhere. The second point about voids, no requirement to scrutinise rates. That worries me. Are they going to charge whatever they like? You know, the council don't have an open checkbook. You know, we should know what prices are going to be charged for items that are going to be carried out. The key drivers for the future, number one, absolutely improving the customer experience. I couldn't disagree. Delivering a service for and with, not to. I like that as well. And also ensuring excellent communication through innovative systems. On the scrutiny report, as I've got time, back on the 4th of September, it referred to further sales of SO postcode area properties. I still haven't had an answer to that, and I'd love to know what that actually means. And thanks very much for allowing me to speak. There's a few questions in there, and I'd love to get answers to the original email that I sent on the 6th of September. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. And if I can ask Ms Hendy now to join the rest of his team and continue with their presentation, at which point, when that's happened, members will be free to ask questions. You may or may not refer to the two councillors who've just contributed to the meeting and use some of theirs as a basis of your own questions, but we'll have those questions after the presentation. So thank you very much, Simon. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm taking the place of Gillian Knight tonight. She's ill, not able to attend the meeting. So I'm going to be joined with Yvonne, as Councillor Westwood said, and also Jamie Butt from our procurement team as well. So we'll be dividing the presentation up between the three of us. Purpose of the presentation is really threefold. Firstly, to explain the options in terms of the approach to procurement, explain our current thinking around that, and has already been said, to seek your views that can be incorporated on the journey of this report to Cabinet in November, which will be via scrutiny as well. So just by way of introduction, that's the sort of background of the existing position for the contracts. Councillor Cook asked what was the position with the Ocado previously Osborne contract that was extended to run to 2026. It wasn't originally for the life from 2011 to 2026. What we're going to explain tonight is the process that we'll be going through over the next 2 years leading up to the selection of a new contractor. Next slide.
Thank you, Simon. So just to continue, as Councillor Cook referenced earlier on, we did undertake a number of stakeholder engagement opportunities, both with resident staff members and contractors. And we invited all households in our stock to complete a survey on our behalf to tell us about their views on the repair service. And we did receive a good response, so 823 responses, which is really positive when we think about the level of engagement with our customers, and that they were able to respond both in hard copy and by email and social media as well, which is really helpful. We did host the residents' workshops as referenced, and unfortunately attendance wasn't as we would have liked to have seen. So it's disappointing that we did invite a number of residents who chose not to attend for a variety of reasons. But we did get really positive feedback from our residents when they did respond to the surveys that we sent out. Thank you. And then moving through, we also undertook conversations with Ocado and CCS to understand what works well and what needs to improve. And we also worked with our housing staff as well and made sure that they had opportunities to give feedback again. So very close to the service and the challenges and the good things that happen within it. And also we worked with members as well to get some really good feedback from them. And then we worked with contractors to understand from them actually what was their level of interest in our contract if they were to express an interest in that. And that was following an advert. And we then had further conversations via online event to attract other interest as well. And ultimately, we were able to test various procurement options and a proposed pricing market that would take us to that point as well.
So really useful sessions, thank you. And then we were thinking about the proposed scope of the contract to include repairs and maintenance, as we touched on earlier on, voids or our empty homes that we bring to a repairable standard to enable people to move into those in a timely manner. We think about our compliance services as well, the big six that are really important through to our regulator. There's cyclical and planned programmes as well, so significant contract as was touched on earlier on. And potentially that our retrofit programme could also be included with that if that was something that we wanted to do with a long-term contract, so that we had security in the provision of that. And we do have a repairs hub in the housing team at the moment, and we do want to continue with that. And there's a conversation about whether or not that continues to be operated by us, or whether or not the provider actually runs that service. And then again, co-location within the city office, if that's the case at the moment, the team do sit on the housing floor, and we would expect that to continue regardless of the provider of that service. Thank you. I'll hand over to Jamie.
Thanks, Yvonne. Hello, everybody. I get the really interesting bit about contracts, but I will mention here, before I dive into the contract models, that actually the engagement that we did with the contractors, it was an open invitation, public advert. We invited people into a webinar, so it's open to everybody. We had quite a few attendees, really good mix of suppliers and people, good interest. Not only did we do that, we issued a questionnaire which talks about contract models, so the ones I'm just about to talk about, the pricing models. We also talked about delivery models, that kind of thing. So it's really, sorry, I was close enough. So yeah, we did really give everyone an opportunity to put forward an opinion before we got into a formal process. So yeah, very good feedback from all involved. One-to-one sessions were particularly useful. Got some really good conversations on that. So in terms of contracts, JCT measured term contract is what we got at the moment. I rather unfashionably call it master and servant type contract because it's very much it's quite combative relationship, I believe. The kind of positive points of it is it's aligned to UK law, but it's not suited to planned programmes and the like. It's not innovative, and it doesn't really cover contract management, which I think is very important in this contract. We need to have a good relationship. We need to be talking as a partnership. The TAC One Alliance contract is very much becoming more favoured within the sector. It's written especially for repair services and planned services. There's actually an obligation in there for both parties to collaborate. There are other contract models that talk about collaboration, but I think this one really does take it seriously. And talking to contractors, around about 60% of those who responded said this was in their favoured model. JCT was clearly in there, but it wasn't so popular. NEC is been around for a few years. It was kind of a bit of a competitor to JCT, and this was proposed to be a collaborative model, although it's quite interesting. I'm a bit of a contract geek. There is no definition of what collaboration means in the contract. And just a bit more to say on NEC, it's not really suited to it's suited to big programs, and does take an awful lot of administration and specialism to manage. So I think in the documentation that we've sent previously, TAC is favoured amongst the contractors that we speak with. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the really meaty bit. Various pricing mechanisms are available, and again, we talked at length as a group and also as one-to-one with the contractors. So we've got honest opinions within on a one-to-one basis, which is very valuable. Price per property used to be the flavour of the month before COVID. But there's an awful lot of risk in price per property, in that we could begin with 20,000 properties, for instance, and I'm just picking a number at random. But if that changes or if it's uncapped, it can be very risky for contractors. So a lot of contractors said, they would not, it's a red line for them, they would not bid for a price per property. It's good for the council, but it wouldn't be good for contractors that wouldn't be interested. A number of them said that they wouldn't be interested in bidding for a price per property. What it does give you is straightforward information, greater cost certainty, and it's simple to carry out forecasting. By converse, price per repair is actually fairer for both parties. What you get with price per property as opposed to price per repair is risk would not be priced into that. It would be it's fair apportionment of risk. We pay exactly for what you get. It's pay as you go. Obviously, the more repairs you have, the higher it goes. But obviously, what's key here is managing cost and budget, and making sure that repairs are done properly first time. Next slide, please. Okay, schedule of rates. These used to be quite popular. What you get with these is you can see it's very. It says there's no requirement to scrutinise exclusions. That means because there should be a clear list of what's not included and what is included in the price list. That there is a risk of rate building in this type of scenario if you don't understand your cost base, and it's less easy to forecast. And speaking to contractors, they did not feel that scheduler rates would offer best value for all parties. We also discussed open book, where you pay actual cost, but I think some of the problems we have with this is not everyone was able to accurately describe what their cost base would be. We'd also need to have an independent auditor to make sure that we're not getting turned over on the costs. And I think the last point there says that not many contractors, I think I've already said that, do actually struggle to get accurate costs. Next slide, please. And finally, price per void. This is these are suggested. Sorry, let me start again. The council pays for works to avoid as per the basket rates. What's proposed is basket rates will be set for the first year of the contract, and then we will review market conditions further on in the contract. What is meant by no requirement to scrutinise the rates is because they will be set hard set in the contract and reviewed on an annual basis. And the advantage of this pricing model is as there's no remeasurement, which would require ongoing monitoring throughout the contract, and it's straightforward to monitor. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jamie. So just to continue, we looked at a number of delivery options that would be available to us for this particular contract. So a lead contractor, so a single entity that would be delivering the service with their directly employed management, and also operatives and subcontractors to undertake the specialist and planned works that are required within the contract. Alternatively, we would have a managing contractor, so they're similar to the lead, but they would have no directly employed operatives. They would rely entirely on subcontractors. Alternatively, multi-source, which is a range of smaller specialist subcontractors or contractors rather, and that then brings with it multiple demands in terms of contract management and complexity to service delivery. And then Another alternative would be a direct labour organisation. So we as a council would employ our own direct labour force to deliver our repairs and maintenance services and the other aspects of the contract that we're talking about. And at this point in time, we're not actually in a position to be able to achieve the setup of such an organisation within the timescales that we're working to. And I'm going to hand back to Jamie. Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Next slide, please. Okay, so procurement, a big stop press here for anyone that's interested in procurement law. So this procurement was set up. We were looking at the new regulations which are due to come on stream on the 28th of October. I've spent many evenings and on online classes with the Cabinet Office trying to get my head around this new legislation. I've been through 3 iterations of legislation, so I wasn't too concerned, but this was going to be a big change. So we were all geared up for running a competitive flexible procedure, which I was quite excited about because it does allow us to be a bit more, as the name suggests, be a bit more flexible. But what's happened is on Thursday we had an email to say that this is now delayed until February the 24th, I believe. And so where it was advantageous to follow the new legislation as it came in, there was lots of advantages to do that. It's less so now because the systems required to follow that route are not in place. But what the big but I should mention is that it doesn't affect the timescale. It doesn't affect what we do. We'll still be doing it in a transparent and fair way. The principles of current legislation, which is Public Contract Regulations 2015, is very much the same as the incoming legislation. It's all about transparency, not distorting competition, that kind of thing. So we'll be following the same processes. It just means that we, in some ways, there's less burden on the organisation in terms of some of the reporting and notifying that's required under the new processes. A big thing for the new process is a central digital platform, which is not ready. It was causing me a little bit of nervousness actually because we would need to advertise something, but if there's no way to advertise it, then it's going to cause us an issue. So in terms of so sorry, that was a long way of explaining that the law has changed in the last few days and our presentation therefore is a little bit out of date. So, and the second point there actually says we would have been one of the first councils to work within that new act. Obviously, if we're not doing that, we're going to be using tried and tested legislation, which has been around for 10 years, which is useful. We know a lot more about that. We do have a specialist procurement person that works within the market and has done this with many councils across the country, has got very big experience, comes from a big consultancy house, and so we've got some very good, a lot of good expertise behind us, as well as legal expertise internally and externally. So we're well placed to have all the right people advising on this. One of the things that I was quite keen, coming from my background, is the quality and price. We wanted to drive we want a good service. We didn't want to, so we're looking at 60% quality, and as mentioned, 10% will be given over to social value and environment. And we've received very good feedback from written feedback actually from contractors on that. They welcomed that approach. So it's really, as it says there, race to the bottom. I think this comes from Grenfell, where government white papers are talking about making sure it's not just about the lowest cost, because the lowest cost doesn't necessarily bring you the best service. So I think that's really it will stop the game playing, we think, for people to just get a contract but not actually and then come back and have conversations further down the line and say this we can't do it at this cost, and I've seen that happen. I've worked in companies where that happens, so I think that's really important that we focus on quality as well as price. Price is important, but we want to pay the right price. Again, this slide is a little bit out of date. Competitive flexible, we will be following a competitive dialogue approach. And to be honest, we were going to be following that approach anyway, just under a different name. It's more defined under the current legislation. But we think it's important to talk to suppliers rather than just put out a proposition and not let them have any conversation. And that's been throughout the process. We want it to be a partnership. Just at the bottom there, we're talking about we will kind of have a phase where we asked it be a request for participate, and there'll be due diligence where we'll look at obviously we want any of the best providers to go through, so there'll be a shortlisting phase that'll be through a questionnaire, and then we will kind of sift down finally to get to the a good amount of the right amount to further progress with dialogue. Talking about resident engagement earlier, I know there was identified in the conversations that some would want to be involved in this process, and I would welcome that. They're a stakeholder, and therefore, they would welcome them to be involved in the process. There's a lot to evaluate. Obviously, it won't be all areas, but that would be really useful to have a very good mix of specialisms and viewpoints. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Jamie. So just to summarise timescales so far, so 2 slides for this essentially. So we've been through the research phase and we've covered that off at the moment. We're preparing tender documents and hopefully finalising our strategy unless government changes its plans again, Jamie. But that's the intention at the moment. And so these are the governance processes we're working through when we'll be publishing the contract notice and the bid evaluations. And I think it's fair to say, these dates may flex and change, but we are confident that we will be able to meet the timescale for the contract re-procurement that we have to work to, so that the new contracts can start in 2026. Go to the next slide, please. And just to say, just to continue through, we expect to be awarding the new contract in December 2026, having given notice in September 2025. So we do expect that we will be on target to let those new contracts in July 2026, subject to things that may flex and change, as we've talked about essentially. Okay, thank you. I shall refer back to my colleague. Sorry, thank you. I'll hand over to Simon. Thank you.
So hopefully through what you've heard so far, you'll understand that this is a different approach to the procurement of this contract, moving towards one which was very much sort of, and Jamie's used the terminology sort of master of servant and quite sort of combative management approach to the delivery of the repairs service, to one which is a strategic partnership and a long-term strategic partnership. Councillor Westwood has already made the point about using new technology to provide a much better service for our customers, and we know some of the larger R&M providers have invested heavily in very sophisticated IT systems that will give our customers the ability to report and track their repairs, and that will be something that we won't need to invest in. We can just require that system integrates with our existing housing management systems. The essence of the contract is to generate a partnership which will work on the basis of continuous improvement, working closely together between us and the contractor. So I'm going to go through some of these recommendations, but also pick up some of the questions raised by Councillor Hall and Councillor Cook. We are at the moment thinking about recommending a lead contractor. So just to remind you, that is a contractor that employs 80% of the staff directly, but also subcontracts out some work, as opposed to the other main sort of large contractor model, which would be all work contracted out. So there would be some continuity of service provision from the employed staff from a lead contractor. Jamie's already spoken about the evaluation model of 60/40 in terms of quality and price. Clearly, it's right that contractors make a reasonable profit off the contract, and a long-term contract arrangement working closely with us will allow that to take place. We will benefit from the significant supply chain advantages that a large contractor has and will be able to bring to this approach. We've already talked about an element of that evaluation that will be put aside for social value, environmental, and just to pick up one of the questions around apprenticeships, and that clearly that's something that will come out probably as part of the competitive dialogue with the shortlisted contractors. Councillor Horrell raised the point about a 10-year contract with no breaks, but open book reviews at 3, 5 and 7 years. And just to make it clear, that does not mean that we are bound to that contractor for 10 years, come what may. The contract will enable us to terminate the contract with the contractor, giving 6 months notice if there is significant failure on their behalf. So that's quite different from having built-in breaks at those 3, 5 and 7. As I've already said, the approach is to work closely with the contractor so that we can generate value for our customers over a long-term strategic partnership. Councillor Horrell also raised the question of, is it sensible to put all our eggs in one basket? And you've got a list of possible works that will be included in this. Clearly, repairs would be in there, planned works, cyclical works, compliance works and retrofit works. We will be asking the contractor to provide indicative prices for that work when they first tender. We will not be obliged to use that contractor for that work over the life of the contract. Every year when we develop the programmes, we'll give the contractor the opportunity to price for that work and provide us a price, but we're not obliged to use the contractor for that. We can go to the open market for that. We will have experience of open market prices before we enter in this contract, which we can use for a benchmark to establish whether we should go with this contractor or go out to the market. But again, having a significant amount of work all in one place would allow us to benefit from supply chain economies that these contractors can provide. I think that deals with most of the questions, other than some of the questions that Councillor Cook raised in relation to the questions that she raised at the Scrutiny Committee. And my understanding, Simon Howson's here, some of those questions, Councillor Cook, were addressed in the scrutiny minutes and provided to the subsequent cabinet meeting after scrutiny. And just to respond to your point about invoices being checked, you conflated two issues there. We were talking about a clerk of works being in place for retrofit work, and we've just appointed a clerk of works, but they're not in place yet. They will be managing the retrofit works. We do assess invoices for repair works, some of which include post inspections where our surveyors go and look at the works, some of which are desk-based inspections. But just to clarify, that's the case there. You raised the point about the workshops and was it disappointing that the level of attendance by our customers and that, and Yvonne said yes, it was disappointing. We did encourage people to come along there. Just to reiterate, that's not the only opportunity for our customers to become involved in this process. We have a consumer standards group which focuses solely on the safety social housing regulator requirements, and that would be the group that would pick up this work, and we're engaging with them on a regular basis to make sure that we can feed any ideas they have to this significant procurement. Location of the hub we've already spoken about, so that's the people that we employ at the moment that undertake the ordering of works when our customers phone up or they email through the portal system. And we've already mentioned that it would be more efficient if that service was located jointly with the contractor. It may well be in the future the contractor's IT systems can actually deal with that directly without our customer needing to come through us. And lastly, Councillor Cook, you raised the point about SO and postcode properties, and I don't think that was picked up in the minutes of Scrutiny Committee and presented to Cabinet. But that SO is an acronym and it relates to shared ownership properties. So that's what it was relating to in the previous meeting. The only other point I want to pick up in relation to that last slide is the pricing mechanism. You'll see here that we're recommending the pricing mechanism for the contract to be price per repair and price per void, and not price per property. The reason for that is twofold. We don't have very good stock condition data. If we had very good stock condition data, we would be able to share that with the contractors and they would be able to price the work per property with confidence and therefore not price in risk and therefore inflating costs. Therefore, it's in our interest to offer the contractors to price this on a price per repair basis with some exclusions. The other thing to bring to your attention is that in Winchester, the current demand for repairs runs at an average of 4.1 repairs per property per year. That's nearly twice the industry average. So as part and parcel of this procurement, we need to bring forward policies that the council can adopt in relation to repairs and maintenance. So making it really clear what repairs we'll do as a landlord and what repairs we expect the tenant to do as a tenant. But at the same time, giving our customers advice in terms of if they want to do those repairs themselves, how they could do that, so we can manage that. The other thing we need to do is to introduce policies around things such as the void process, because that will impact on contractors pricing the work on a price per void. And also we need to bring forward policies on recharge policies, so that if we do repairs for our customers, which are not our responsibility, we'll make it clear to our customers we're quite happy to do it, but our intention will be to recharge the cost of those works to the tenant. I'll leave it there, Chair. We're happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and open it now to members for questions. Councillor White.
So picking up on something that Councillor Horrell was asking about social value. So presumably the 10% is like the bare minimum that you should provide. Is there a way you might be looking for more than the 10%? And has the fact that the legislation has been delayed, has that affected that level of social value? And just lastly, you mentioned transparency. So how will we see what the social value has been?
Thank you, Councillor. I think we need to develop we've got a number at the moment. It's not set in stone. So at the moment we're just taking views. We've been planning the procurement, what it's going to look like. But yeah, in terms of evaluation, that needs to be determined, and detail needs to sit behind that. And kind of questions around apprenticeships and that kind of thing. Having been involved in public sector contracts, I think and sometimes been on the other side of it, delivering social value is very hard to do it meaningfully. So I think for me personally, I'd want to see something tangible. So we need to determine what that looks like and what the numbers look like.
Councillor Morris.
Two really easy questions, I'm sure. In order to put this presentation into context, regarding the pricing mechanisms, what pricing mechanisms are we currently using, and how would you say that they are working in terms of value for money and resident outcomes? My second question is, in your verbal presentation, you recommended that we enter into a TAC1 contract. That's not listed in our recommendations to Cabinet, so I'm wondering whether that's implicit in this presentation, or whether we should have it added to our recommendations to Cabinet, or whether it's not something for us to decide at this particular date. One of those three. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Miller.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you. One of my questions is really, with the end of the current contract, what happens if the current contractor effectively runs out of staff because they will either losing their jobs or they lose interest, shall we say? Do we end up with our new contract being very expensive because there's a lot of work not done? And how do we recover that cost on the current contractors, or can't we? And what do we do if for some reason, I can't think why, that we don't get this in place in time and the current contract ends before we've got the new contractor in? They're sort of reverse of each other, I agree, but because I can see that we can end it 3 months early if necessary, but what happens if we have to extend it for some reason?
Sorry, I was reminded by my vice chair that I hadn't allowed the answer to Councillor Morris's question first. So, sorry, Councillor Wood, if I can just ask you to wait and the response to Councillor Morris's question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Hopefully deal with all those questions together. Currently, we run scheduler rates. That's the current model that we use with contractors. In terms of value for money, clearly it's a stated price that's been provided by the contractors. It requires a lot of administration, as you can imagine. Witness the fact that it's been mentioned this evening that there was a significant overspend last year on repairs and maintenance, and a large part of that was related to an agreed RPI increase on the contract over the last 10 years, and it took officers a significant amount of time to agree with the contractor what that RPI increase could be on all those different schedules of rates. The other question was Tech One, was it implicit that we'll be using that contract? And yes, it is, because that form of contract particularly allows a more collaborative approach to management of this service between the council and the contractor. So it's implicit that we'll be using Tech One rather than those other contract models. Councillor Miller asked about the current contractor and if they weren't successful in terms of winning this current procurement process. Number one, TUPE will apply. So any of their staff that are directly employed in undertaking work at the moment, TUPE could apply, which is transfer undertaking protection of employment. So their staff could be transferred to the winning contractor. So there'll be continuity on that basis. In terms of if we don't achieve the procurement in the required timescale, obviously we're not planning to do that. We are planning to get it done in the required timescale. It would, if we don't and there's slippage in that, then it would amount to whether there's the ability under the existing contracts to extend it still further while the procurement's taking place.
Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair. My first question was going to be almost the inverse of Councillor Horrell's, which is what's the perceived advantage to the council of having a 10-year contract if you park or exclude kind of the cost of needing to recompete in a nearer time frame?
I think the advantage of a 10-year contract is that it reduces the cost of procurement you're doing at once. You're attracting contractors that will be keen to price for this work that are of a sufficient size and will generate supply economies that should deliver better economies for the council. Hopefully through the presentation, the argument's been made that that would be a more effective way of approaching this procurement. The other end of the spectrum, of course, is to actually contract with loads of smaller contractors. It requires a significant amount of administrative management input from the council to manage that.
Actually, just a question from myself. You mentioned there in referring to the 10-year contract that there's open book reviews at 3, 5 and 7 years. What is actually reviewed at that point? What sort of work is done in terms of the contract at that point? And you mentioned that the contract could actually have a break at with 6 months notice if there are severe sort of failings. What sort of things would constitute a severe failing? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of that, that's quite a contractual detail, which I can reply to outside of the meeting. That's okay. But I would suggest that would be kind of value for money, how it, KPIs, that kind of thing, and how it was going for everybody. It's really just a sense check of how the contract's going and if is it achieving what it set out to do.
Thank you. And you mentioned their KPIs. That was one of my further questions is, there aren't any KPIs mentioned in this. So when in part of the contract do we actually negotiate or stipulate those KPIs? Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't quite hear the last piece.
When in the process are those KPIs developed on the basis of the work we've had we're doing currently? What is it that we would be doing so that when would those KPIs be sort of worked out and sort of included in the contract?
So that kind of conversation will be happening now, and we'll be developing for the process that we were going to follow. We were actually required to publish 3 KPIs. So we've got in mind 3 KPIs that we think, but we obviously want to kind of socialise those ideas within the stakeholders of what they should be. I think number 1 is getting repairs fixed first time, getting it right first time is that kind of thing. But yeah, obviously it's from now on in, and also something that we would discuss with contractors in dialogue.
Chair, if I could just pick up your question on what happens to the open book review. As I suggested, it's an open book review. We will understand what margin the contractor's making on the work they're undertaking for us. I'm led to believe by our specialist advisor that there's been instances where the nature of the pricing mechanisms changed to 3, 5 and 7 year because the level of profit that the contractor's achieving means that we might move from a price per repair to a price per property model. But that would be something that would be negotiated with the contractor at that point in time. But it's an option that we don't have at the moment. You wouldn't have under a scheduler rates model.
Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you, Chair. There are 3 questions. One is my ignorance. 10% social value. What does it mean? If you can explain that. The second one is on the price per void. We state that no requirement to scrutinize rates. Why is that the case? And the third one is you already talked about KPIs. Are there any liquidated damages that you would put it in against the contract? A particular thing is not done on time, not done to the specifications. Are we expecting to get money back or some kind of penalizing the contractor? That's the third question. And the last one is, yes, we decided let's say going for a lead contractor. If that's the case, a lead contractor is assigned for 10 years. I heard in between somewhere that every year we will go out and do some exercise. If the scope of the contract include repairs, planned work, cyclical work, if that doesn't work the way we want, we'll go out again. How does that come about if we have a lead contractor set up for 10 years? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, the 10% social value is an evaluation criteria. It's not saying 10% of their work should be social value. So the contractors will propose to us what they will do to achieve social value. And when we evaluate their proposals, 10% of the evaluation will be on their social value proposals. It's not 10% of their work is social value. Does that clarify?
Maybe. Perhaps out of this meeting, we can take that up and understand.
Second question was price per void. It's quite an industry standard now that contractors are asked to price per void on the extent of works that would need to be done. So very minimal level would be just that the property's cleaned. And that would be it. To the other end of the spectrum would be significant major works required to turn the property around. So rather than every property, we have over 350 properties a year, someone going out and detailed specification taking place, the void would be placed into one of those baskets, and we'd ask contractors to price against those baskets depending on the level of work that's required. Damages, no, because on the price per repair property, the contractor's getting paid for the repair to be completed. So it's not completed to satisfaction, they only get paid the once until it's completed to satisfaction. And the annual work bit, so as I said, when we first procure, we will be asking for prices, for example, for the retrofit work that will be taking place the next financial year, and we'll get prices, and we will have prices from our other contractors the year before that we'll be able to benchmark that against. After that, then we will be providing to our procured contractor, the lead contractor here, the work that we would expect to do in the forthcoming financial year, and they will provide prices for that, but we're not obliged to use them to do that work. We could, if we think they're too expensive, we'll go to the open market and buy that work on the open market. We'll always have that as a benchmark to fall back on.
Thank you.
Councillor Morris.
Yeah, it's regarding the scope of the contract and retrofit works. which I understand is usually covering insulation and double glazing. And my question is whether that would also cover prevention of flooding for properties that are frequently at risk of flooding, or whether we are willing to repair flood damage, or whether we can contract them out to put in place measures to prevent it in the first place. Thank you.
I'm not, at the moment, we don't have any work programmed or repairs and maintenance that is targeted at preventing flooding. Just don't do that.
Councillor Chairman.
Thank you. Two questions for me. The first one, given that the recommendation is for a 10-year contract and the partnering approach that we have discussed this evening, should we not give consideration to having kind of collaboration or value add from a, dare I say, from a buyer supplier perspective as part of the evaluation criteria? Let's say, given that we're looking for the 10-year approach. And the second one, you touched on inflation earlier on. Given the sort of the price per void, price per repair approach, one would assume that would then be subject to indexation over the 10-year period. So there's kind of a risk that sits behind that as well.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of evaluation, definitely we'll include that as a consideration. As I said before, we've not determined what the detail looks like. It's all bets are on at the moment.
On the second question on inflation, yes, there's bound to be indexation linked to that. The advantage we have, of course, is that we will have a review mechanism in the life of the contract. The review mechanism we have in the current contract, as sort of mentioned previously, it's all in one direction at the moment. So there'll be a review mechanism that will be to advantage the council and the contractor in this contract.
You were mentioning there about residents having the ability to raise faults with the contractor directly. Is the expectation then that they will be running the system that supports the repairs, the maintenance, and indeed any of the sort of void work? And if so, what interaction will the council systems have with that system to enable us to be aware of what is actually then going on with sort of the work that's associated with any of our resident properties? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So that's part and parcel of looking at the process of the journey of a repair. One has to question the value that's added by a customer phoning up the hub basically taking down a repair request and then passing that on to the contractor with no value added to that process at all. And in the future, the possibility is that the customer could contact the contractor directly in those circumstances, and that cuts out a loop of the process. Therefore, it cuts out costs as well, at no disadvantage to the customer, therefore makes us more efficient. The expectation would be that any contractor system that took calls or took contact from our customers via the portal, so they were digitally making repair requests, has to integrate with our existing orchard system, housing management system, so we have records of what's happening.
Thank you. So as part of this procurement, that interface, that sort of interworking will be part of the specification, part of the requirement for demonstrating that that can be achieved. Thank you. Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you, Chair. Following your question, Chair, the 2-year period that we have now to decide on the contractor, is that enough time to provide the proper system for integration, what the contractor will have and what we have currently? Thank you.
I think what we can say, Chair, is that some of the contractors that Jamie and colleagues have been speaking to, they already have integrations with the main housing management system. So this is not something that's have to be started from scratch. We use quite a standard housing management systems operated by a number of landlords across the country. So if that integration is already in place, then hopefully it shouldn't be too onerous to get that in place, that integration in place between our system and the contractor system.
Councillor Morris.
Yeah, just to pick up on something you said a few minutes ago about residents making complaints directly to the contractor without it being going through a third party. Isn't there a risk that means there'll be a lack of oversight because it will end up being the residents' word against the contractors with no one else keeping a record of what has been reported and when?
I think answer to that is twofold. We will know what's happening because their system will integrate with their system. So, and the other thing, of course, under the pricing model, the contractors are going to get paid a fixed price per repair unless it's an exclusion from the fixed price from repair. So the contractor will not be able to do works regardless. If they are going to do works that's already specified, they don't get paid any more money. The risk, I suppose, would be, are they doing a repair that doesn't actually need to be done in the first place? The cost to the contractor would be they'd be sending someone round to do that repair. That's a cost to them. That, you know, they're not making any money out of. They may not be making any money out of that.
The more likely instance, I would imagine, is just someone reports a repair and they don't receive a response, and the repair is not done within a timely fashion.
Sorry, Chair, through you. I mean, of course, that's going to be one of the key KPIs in terms of timeliness repair completion, and that's something that we will manage through the integration through our system, because we'll know when a repair is requested, we'll know how quickly that repair should be completed, and we can chase the contractor on the customer's behalf if we haven't had notification from the contractor that that repair is completed on time.
Councillor Ashwell, I think maybe the last question.
This is probably not relevant, but when you said that we had responses from 823 residents, how would you be able to quantify percentage-wise how many were from Winchester city itself and how many were rural? Because quite often the systems that we're going to use in future, the city might be able to respond to it quickly, the rural area might lack. That is where I'm coming from, and how do we make sure that the rural area is catered for equally well? Thank you.
Thank you. So to respond, we are able to break down across those responses where they came from across the Winchester district. So we would be able to understand that detail, and then we would then be able to make sure we are focusing our service deliveries around the needs of those customers. And I think also from our consumer group, that comes from a wide range of customers from different areas across the city as well. So I'm hoping, and from the district, so using that feedback as well, we will have opportunities to gather information from our customers there. And also our sheltered groups have specific working groups within their schemes as well. So I'm hopeful that we've got a number of ways that we can gather that feedback from our customers now and going forward through this procurement process. Thank you.
My only concern is because getting the contractor to the rural area has proven difficult or long in terms of time scale. And I think we want to win the customers over by making sure that that time is minimized. That's where I'm coming from. That's why the question.
Yes.
Thank you. So just to be brief, I think through the systems interfaces that we're looking to do, and also through digitising our services, we do expect that there will be a text service for our customers, so they will actually know when John is in his van and on his way and 10 minutes away. So we are looking to be able to work much smarter and to take account of, you know, digital opportunities that are available to just improve our service offer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think we've come to the end of questions. I'd just like to ask Councillor Westwood, anything before we move into debate that you'd like to summarise?
No, I'd just like to thank you for your questions. I mean, there've been many and varied this evening. I think I go back to my list of key objectives. Many of them relate back to that. So I'm looking for a customer first service that delivers right first time value money to the council. And that's what we're going to go out and tender for and bring that in and deliver a fantastic repair, maintenance service and value the tenants and the council going forwards.
Thank you, Councillor Westwood. Any debate from members of the committee? Thank you. Councillor Chamberlain.
Thank you, Chair. I think, first thing, so we should probably acknowledge, bringing forward a procurement for a 10-year contract is a significant item, and just based on my own personal professional experience, I'm kind of heartened and reassured by some of the answers this evening that we put across to you. So firstly, thank you for that. I think it's the first thing to say. The second thing, looking at the recommendations to Cabinet, the thing that sort of jumps out at me is the move from schedule of rates to price per repair. If I can get my words out, does strike me as sort of bringing risk to our forward budgets in this area, particularly if at the same time we're changing policy. So I think we heard earlier in the presentation that we're sat at higher than the national average rate of repairs across our housing stock at the moment. So it just strikes me that there's kind of a potential financial risk there that we should be aware of as we look to sort of transcend or move from one mechanism to the other, and that we should apprise Cabinet members of that as we look forward to forward budgets, if obviously this were to go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Yeah, I was just interested to learn that there's 4 repairs per property a year, which is significantly above average, and whether that's indicative of us having residents who are particularly sort of accident prone within their households, or whether it's the nature of the properties themselves, or is it the standard of the existing repairs that they have to be done again, and that is certainly an area of concern, I would imagine.
Thank you. Councillor White.
So from what we've heard and seen in the presentation, there's been a lot of research and consultation in the background to this, which, as Councillor Chamberlain said, is heartening and makes us feel confident about the process. Obviously, the price per repair being difficult to forecast the annual spend is going to be something you need to be carefully managed, and as the 10% social value is yet to be determined, it'd be interesting to see what that is when it is determined.
Thank you. Any further debate?
Thank you, Chair. Officers have really done extremely good work here, because when I came into the meeting, I had questions about pricing options, about the how we're going to deliver it, and I think the answers I got are very convincing. The only doubt I had was about the price per repair, because really we can't then fix the for the budget really for HRA, and I think that probably would have to be a judgment based upon statistical data for the previous years. I also got positive answers for the type of contracts that you're using, and that one seems to be the right one to go for it as well. The going for the lead contractor, I think it's really debatable, but I think you know what you're doing, and I would definitely support that for sure. So generally what you have presented to us here, I think I'm very much for it, and I think we will see a customer satisfaction. Definitely, it's not that it's bad, but we can improve it, as the council was saying. 80% is good, but I think we want to go 95%. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I'd like to thank officers for bringing this paper forward. It's clearly quite a large change that the council will be going through to bring our systems and our approach and policies up to date. It's a big change, but I think in terms of ensuring that we actually can guarantee this works, we need to be quite clear about the KPIs, and I think that's sort of something that I'd like to make sure that we sort of and get nailed down, because that's the only way that the contract will then actually be well, we can guarantee that the performance of that contract. So certainly in terms of when it is presented to cabinet, those KPIs I think need to be part of that presentation, if not sort of prior to that. And I think the area that we were talking about in terms of social value, I know it's difficult to work it out, but this is a big contract and we should be getting something from it, which actually enables us to sort of improve some of the social aspects of our communities. So I think that's an area that I think I'd ask us to be really focused on. But otherwise, thank you very much for the presentation. And I think we're just being asked to note and then provide any comments. Matthew, do we need to do anything further in terms of a vote? Okay, great. Well, thank you again for the efforts, and to officers and to Councillor Westwood. Thank you very much for that. So we move on to the final presentation for the evening. One that clearly, as I say, all the previous papers and presentations may give us a bit more insight into. We're looking at the Council Plan 2025 to 2030. And Councillor Todd, if you'd like to introduce this presentation. Thank you.
Yes, very happy to, although I'll be sharing the presentation with Mr. Howson. So essentially the presentation this evening falls into several parts. The first is just a brief introduction to the process of defining the council plan. The next one will be the details of the process that we're going to go through. The second point outlines the structure of the current plan, and then what we're asking the three scrutiny committees to do is to look at their relevant aspects of the plan. And in particular, we want to make sure that we've understood from each committee their thoughts on the future challenges that we face, how the current plan has performed, where they think we need to be getting to by 2030. And we're taking this to all three scrutiny committees. This committee, Economy and Housing, is asked, understandably, to look mostly at the economy and housing. Homes for All, vibrant local economy, and Pride in Place. We've got some assumptions that we'll take you through in terms of the challenges we face, but maybe I'll hand over now to Mr. Howson to go through the presentation in a bit more detail.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader. This presentation really is to kind of set out the process that we're going through to develop the next council plan, that overarching document, as it says there on that first slide, that high-level document covering what the council wants to achieve, uninformed other strategies and plans, including the local plan, individual service plans, those business plans that our services work on to deliver their services. But those are the delivery plans for those objectives, those priorities in the council plan. So this presentation is a very quick look back and then a look forward. It outlines some of those challenges, some of those knowns, some of those unknowns, and then to very much put out to you yourselves as councillors as to what the priorities might be, the areas we need to focus on, what has worked, what hasn't worked. So at the bottom there, policy committees asked to review and comment on the direction of the council plan, including the vision, themes and priorities. little bit of background there. So the current council plan was adopted by council in January 2020, which is the final year of the current 5-year plan, 2020 to 2025. The plan runs until 31st of March next year. So from the 1st of April next year, we'll be into the new plan. This is very much an opportunity to review the outcomes and priorities for the council and the district. And fundamentally, the priorities will be evidence-based. We've just completed a resident survey. The last resident survey was in 2022. There were questions in that resident survey asking residents what they felt the priorities were, and we'll be using that evidence, that information to support those priorities. We've also obviously liaising with yourselves. We're at the policy committee on Thursday and then overview and scrutiny. We've already liaised with our parish councillors a few months back, and we'll also be engaging with businesses at the bid next week and the voluntary sector as well. So it's very much a 5-year look forward to 31st of March 2030, but fundamentally this council plan supports the council to deliver a balanced budget in the future. So when the draft council plan comes to scrutiny in November, on the same agenda you'll have the medium-term financial strategy, and one almost goes hand in glove with the other. The council plan obviously needs to be affordable, but also sets the tone, if you like, to us to enable us to achieve a balanced budget going forward. As I've already said, we're very much into that engagement phase at the moment. It's a very comprehensive engagement phase, that part of that listening better, making sure voices are heard and that we listen to the views of all the people of the district, as many people as possible in the district, to have an input into our next council plan. We've got a scrutiny committee which will discuss on the cross-cutting priorities and performance, considering public consultation during October on those priorities and those objectives that we'll be setting. So just to bring it round, the draft council plan to be considered by scrutiny at its meeting on the 12th of November and then to cabinet in December before coming to full council for adoption in January in the new year. There's a brief reminder there of the current council plan and our vision at the top there, which is we will make a real difference to the lives of our residents, the strength of our business and the quality of our environment. We will listen and work alongside the people and businesses of Winchester District in tackling the challenge we face. And I suspect we'd all be supportive of that and seeing that through to the next council plan. Just to make you aware, Matthew circulated earlier this afternoon a copy of the council plan to give some context to the conversation that we'll be having this evening. And as you can see there, our current priorities in the council plan are tackling the climate emergency and a greener district, as well as the Homes for All, living well, vibrant local economy, your services, your voice. But clearly the focus this evening is very much on that Homes for All and that vibrant local economy, as well as the leader has already alluded to the Pride in Place area of focus. As the leaders already alluded to, roles of overview and scrutiny committees in the plan review, economy and housing this evening, health and environment on Thursday, and then in due course the scrutiny committee, picking up that overall plan performance, your services, your voice and listening better. But for this evening, the focus is very much Homes for All, vibrant local economy and Pride in Place. So key questions for economy and housing this evening. I've got another slide to come back to these, so I'll rattle through these first. How has our local economy and housing challenges changed since 2020 when we developed the current 5-year council plan? What further challenges and changes will we see or expect to see by 2030? And how well has the current 2020-25 council plan delivered for our economy and housing? What strengths should we maintain? What are the gaps? What are the opportunities that we should be seizing and including in our next council plan? What are the areas that our residents and our businesses tell us we need to improve? And what does success look like in 2030? And overarching, what are the critical projects to deliver that success? So we'll come back to those questions in just a moment, but on the next slide, we've used the PESTEL analysis to understand some of those external factors that will influence and impact on us as a council and our ability to deliver the council plan priorities over the coming years. I won't go through all of them, but you can see they're arranged by political, economic, social, technological, legal and environment. And I suspect we've not included them all there, but they're the ones that, you know, the big ones, the ones that we know about that will have an impact on us over the next 5 years at least. So what I would do is bring this back round to the questions that we wanted to ask yourselves, but I'll stop there and just sort of take any questions first, perhaps before we dive into those, if I may, Chair.
Thank you, Simon, for that presentation. Any questions or any thoughts in terms of the council plan with regard to the economy and housing aspects that have been put into that presentation? Councillor White.
It's not specifically about economy and housing. It's more general about the plan and what evidence is going to be used to formulate the new one. And I was recently looking at the corporate peer review feedback and the sort of some of the key things from there. So the perception that the council is too focused on the city at the expense of the wider district, the way the council could utilise voluntary and community sectors more, and the fact that the council is only at the beginning of its equality, diversity and inclusion journey. So I was just wondering how those things are going to feed into what you're doing with the new plan, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, so when the you've seen a presentation, you haven't seen the final corporate peer review. That's due to be published fairly shortly. At the same time, we will put forward an action plan that outlines how we're going to address the input that we've received and maintain the strengths that it's also highlighted. And of course, it's one of the pieces of evidence that feeds into identifying how we need to improve. So, you know, when we're in everything we do, we are looking at external evidence that tells us how we're doing and how we can perform better. And the reason we asked for a corporate peer review and you know, made a big priority to have that review was precisely so that we could identify opportunities to improve and reflect that in our thinking on the council plan. And that is, you know, everything that we've heard this evening. We are seeking evidence because it covers all the council's activities. Effectively, any piece of evidence that there is something that we want to reflect. But we are also particularly keen to hear the views and insights of the people on this committee, particularly as it refers to economy and housing.
Thank you, Councillor Todd. Councillor Miller.
One of the things it says is how has the housing challenge has changed since 2020? Well, the answer is at the present moment, private landlords are leaving the market in a vast number and will continue to do so. So our need for housing is going to get greater, and we're going to have a lot of people being evicted in the next 6 to 9 months, if not sooner. How are we going to cope with that in this plan or the next plan? Because undoubtedly the number of private housing is going to rented out is going to decrease very rapidly, partly because of government legislation and partly because of the ageing of the people that own buy-to-let properties.
I think that's a very good question, and I think you're right to highlight those threats and issues. There are a lot of changes going on in the housing market at the moment. There's the move towards more professional landlords as well, more greater use of corporate landlords. Build to rent is an increasing sector as well. It's partly something that is addressed in our local plan, and we can't deal with everything in the council plan other than outlining that we're going to do this. But at this stage, what we are trying to understand is the future as we look over the next 5 years, and we don't know the full impact of the government's policies, and that is an uncertainty we'll have to deal with. In the short term, we are aware that there is increasing pressure on homelessness and temporary housing, and it's possible that the government's new rules on evictions may accelerate that pressure. And so, separate from the council plan, which we're here to talk about this evening, there is urgent work going on at the moment to make sure that we have the temporary accommodation and homelessness strategy that we need in the event that, as some people fear, the government's policies have an impact on making that situation worse. At the same time, they are also talking about increased support for affordable housing, and that's part of the policy context that we need to see. But again, we have the slight uncertainty of the one piece of feedback that I think everybody in the sector is giving them is that to accelerate the rate of affordable housing and social housing coming forward, it is going to involve support from the Treasury. And as with all these things, we will believe it when it happens.
Thank you. Just to remind us, we are being asked to look at Homes for All, Vibrant Local Economy and Pride in Place. So I think the questioning seems to have started around housing. So if I could ask if there are any questions that we work on housing, and then we'll move on to the two other areas, just so that Councillor Ashwell.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier this evening, we were presented with the 2021 census data. Clearly, it shows a growing elderly population. Now, we need to look at that when we look at the Homes for All. I think we need probably focus on the aged population. What can we do to support them? Now, also there was a data where the council houses where the disabled people are, I think 35% or something of the kind. Now, what have we done for them, and can we incorporate that in the houses that we're going to look for, or build the care homes for people, or whatever it is? That's one thing which I think we should consider looking at. Also, earlier on, somebody did say that the old person strategy is going to be soon incorporated, November this year, I think. So that will be something interesting to see. We can incorporate that in our council plan. What can be done? Talking about the housing. Housing relates not just the housing itself, but infrastructure associated with it. And obviously, we as Winchester City Council really can't influence it, but maybe we can put pressure on people who are associated with it. So whether it's the flooding that causes because the population has grown up, the network, the pipes is not good enough to cope with that, what can we do? Water associated with it, what can be done to alleviate that situation? They're all related to housing. I will go a step further, or maybe I will come back to it if you're talking about the vibrant local economy and Pride in Place as an issue later on, perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what you think the main factors are that need to be addressed, is more about us asking you than you asking us. I mean, this is very much the intent, that we hear the views of the committee on these particular issues, and I think the intent was to take some questions about, the structure of the paper and what it was we were doing, more of a process point. But I think you're right to raise the ageing population challenge. It's why we put it into the paper. You're right to raise the challenge of infrastructure. It's why we have an infrastructure plan for the first time to go with our local plan. But there may well be things that we need to do more than that. We were talking earlier when we were having the business discussion. I mean, it's that digital connectivity, and actually coming back to a point raised by Councillor White, thinking about digital connectivity in rural areas in particular, and making sure that we have the speed of connectivity right across the district that enables rural economies to thrive, as well as Winchester, obviously, and the market towns, are all critical factors that we need to be looking at. And I think working out which of these are the most important, which are the ones that require our attention as priority, will also be something useful to get your views on as we move into that stage of the meeting.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I guess I'll preface this with, having been a councillor for 18 months or so, I'm challenging myself as to whether this is just different to what I expected or whether it's a change. But from a housing perspective, one of the themes seems to be, to me, kind of the increasing need for kind of a diversity of housing needs. We spoke about emergency housing, or short-term housing requirements. In terms of, if I think of the casework that I've picked up in my time, it has been a lot about a change of circumstance for various different reasons. That could be poor health, driving a need for a different housing requirement, and that for me seems to be a very emergent, thing. Certainly it's different to what I expected. So I perhaps don't have the experience to say whether that's a change from 2020, but it's certainly something that stuck out to me over the last year and a half. That kind of very diversified need for housing.
I think that is something where there is definitely a direction of travel at the moment. So, for example, it was something that we were starting to see in about 2020. But for example, there's an increasing use is when you build housing for older people that you need to build doors wide enough to get wheelchairs through. And actually, older people's housings, particularly if you're trying to support people in downsizing, there's a lot of evidence you need to make rooms bigger so they don't have to throw out absolutely everything they own when they downsize. So there are smart things that we can do. Now, to a certain extent, this is covered by the local plan, and it's not, but it does have an impact on us as a housing provider. And it will be to a degree also dealt with by the market. But I certainly think that we need to be thinking in wider terms about the different housing needs that we have and the support that goes around them. Yes, so I would agree with you. I think that is an interesting trend that we've seen.
Councillor White.
Going back to something we were saying earlier about encouraging young people to stay in the district, and one of our officers mentioned about the fact that it's the lack of affordable housing that's really at the crux of it. So I think that was in the previous council plan, but I think it's become even more important, the affordability of housing.
Absolutely, and not just affordability. Young people are often, depending on their stage in life, may be more interested in, for example, single-person flats in a way that the need for an older person in a single-person flat is likely to be quite different. And certainly one of the ideas behind the new Winnell Flats building was to have a wider and better offer that was affordable to people who weren't necessarily going to qualify for social housing. So yes, absolutely, we do need to be thinking about that.
Just in terms of the aging population, I'm just wondering in terms of the opportunity there of accommodation which they may be staying in, which obviously we try to support with disabled grants and sort of services to enable them to remain in those properties. However, there is from the district's point of view a sort of a lost opportunity for that accommodation to be used by families, in terms of encouraging or taking more of the sort of housing need. Is there any sort of policy that could be put in place to encourage that type of downsizing that we as a council could sort of offer to shift that dynamic that makes it more favourable to sort of move into a smaller property, thus freeing up those larger properties for families and other members of or other residents of the district?
There are a range of policy ideas coming forward on this, some of which are in our control and some of which aren't. I think part of it is encouraging is making sure that we have allocations and we encourage the development of older persons housing. I think also I think there's a wider question which actually I think it's reasonable to include it in scope, which is that we think beyond not just the house but also the wider environment. So one of the reasons why some of us are very keen on encouraging walking and cycling and wheeling, as we sometimes talk about it, is that if we're actually serious about it and we're making our pavements wider and flatter and higher quality and suitable width to allow for wheelchairs and all the other things that you might want to be doing, then we're actually creating an environment that is better, that is disability friendly and better for people to live in. But that is in a old city like Winchester, that is quite a long-term project, but it is definitely something we should be aspiring towards, I think. I mean, it may be helpful to look at the questions. This slide was really meant to be questions to us. I think in terms of structuring the discussion, it may also be useful to perhaps look back at some of the and I don't know if we could have the next slides, to look back at the you know, the council plan and see if that also triggers some thoughts in terms of well, I mean, we have the questions up there that might help in terms of how we have the discussion. If there are any more questions, more about the process and what we're doing, a bit like Councillor White's one at the beginning about was the CPC, you know, review going to be part of it, then happy to take those. But otherwise, it may be useful to look at some of these issues in slightly more depth. I think I've said everything you want to say, but you know.
So are there any other questions in terms of housing? Councillor Morris.
An emerging challenge for housing is the climate emergency, which at the moment in all the documentation it seems to be in terms of we are making the houses more green, more eco-friendly. But there's the other side of it, which is the houses also have to be more resilient to extreme weather events, such as wind, rain, flooding, and in particular extreme heat. And something that's going to come down the line is we are going to have housing which is wonderfully insulated when it's cold, but has no air conditioning when it's extremely hot.
Yes, I mean, again, that flows into our policies in various different directions. In terms of new housing, that is something that is addressed at quite some length in the local plan, both in preempting the impacts of things like climate change and in how houses are designed. But a very obvious example that I know from my own ward is that, you know, we're having to see increased installation of flood barriers and flood-proof doors in private houses in places that have never needed them in 100 years, and now they do. And so that is something that won't necessarily be done by us. It might be paid for by the Environment Agency. It could be, you know, but it could be something where we have a role in enabling it, signposting it. But absolutely, you know, if I was to take a big step back, and I think, although we divided the groups up into, you know, 3 different committees, obviously there are cross-cutting questions, and looking at the impact of climate change on housing and business is incredibly important. And if I had to say, one of the things that's changed is that in 2019 and 2020, our big focus was probably saying, right, we've got to stop this happening. We've got to cut carbon. And that was the absolute priority. I think 5 years on, with the flash floods that we've started seeing in Winchester and across the district, I would say we have to dial up resilience, because in practice, it's going to happen. We are going to see these high temperatures. We are going to see flash flooding. And we as a council need to be thinking about our role alongside other partners in that resilience question. And even when it comes down to, you know, how we do central Winchester regeneration, we will be thinking more about flooding than we probably would have. We were already thinking about flooding because it's you know, a historical area of groundwater flooding. But I think we're seeing increased surface flooding, for example, and we will have to be thinking about that in a way that maybe we weren't 5 years ago.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Any further sort of questions or thoughts or sort of areas that we want to talk about in terms of housing? If we move on to the vibrant economy, then is there anything that members would like to raise or suggestions in terms of the council plan for 25-30?
I'll preface this, but I'm not sure what, you know, quite sure what the answer is for Winchester on this. But if I look at what will be different by 2030, if I think about vibrant local economy, and I guess I'm again thinking this through the context of kind of market towns and rural areas, I think we quite often sort of fall into the trap of talking about relatively big infrastructure projects to support this. Even if we're talking about sort of broadband and connectivity, we sort of think of it through the lens of, fibre connectivity to rural areas. If I look ahead to 2030, I think actually the answer kind of lies more on effectively the kind of the satellite internet connectivity, 5G connectivity area. So I guess looking forward, it's kind of what could we do more from a district perspective to support the smaller companies, of which we heard earlier on. There is a significant amount of the district, the kind of the 0 to 9 employee type companies with digitization from that perspective. I don't necessarily have in my head what the answer is from which gender part to play there, but I suspect it's not in, trying to roll out fibre to every small business in the district, but there must be something we can do there to help underpin connectivity in rural areas where, where I live. In reality, there is no chance there will ever be a fibre connection there.
Well, I think this is one where it's useful to, there is national information available on how we're doing on GigaNet broadband and other such things, which I think unfortunately or fortunately will become expected. I mean, a bit like we are with the LETI standard in the local plan, which is about setting carbon objectives and energy usage objectives rather than saying what the technology should be. I don't want to get into what is the way to wire the countryside or wire more remote areas. I just know that it needs to be done because it will be just something that needs to be taken for granted in terms of business. Now, obviously, that, again, the whole question of infrastructure is something we address at some length in our local plan, but it is something that we need to think more broadly about, even if it does end up as a partnership exercise. Digital is one of the areas that Hampshire County Council will be looking at as part of the new business arrangements there, and it's something that I'm keen that they do. And of course, it's not the only answer. There are other things that we need to be looking at in terms of our economy as well. And we can't, broadband our way to economic growth. It's probably a bit harder than that.
That's very well.
Thank you, Chair. Following Councillor Chamberlain's comment, what is going to be different in 10 years' time or in 5 years' time? And yes, you already mentioned, Leader, the warmer climate is going to happen, but it's not all doom and gloom, because probably our farming practice will change, and maybe we can do something with the farming. Grapes are already growing in Hampshire, so maybe that is where our focus could be in terms of vibrant economy. We could encourage farmers to go. I don't know what can we do in terms of encouraging them, but artificial intelligence is something going to happen over the next 5 years. In fact, it's happening now. It will affect all our activities in the next 5 years. How do we do our economy? How do we do transport? How do we do banking is already. So that is where focus could be in terms, and places like Whiteley, where, you already talked about the internet connection and fiber band and all that. That's already coming way in there. It will encourage more, and at least the local plan is talking about providing area for the offices over there, which is very encouraging to see that. Because today maybe the offices are not busy, but I've seen over the last 2 years offices are getting busy. People are coming into the offices, the car parks are busy, so obviously it will grow, and then we'll need spaces for that. That is where I think in the next 5 years that's going to happen. We should look at that as well. Thank you.
I think you make a very good point. I mean, firstly, yes, I don't know if AI is just the latest fad and it'll be gone like many of these other things like crypto or whatever before we know it, or whether it is something that will have a major impact on lives or somewhere in between. And you're absolutely right to say, climate change will lead to other changes, and the wine industry is growing. I have said before, I quite fancy the idea, and I'd like to work with the local industry for Winchester to be the wine capital of England. And indeed, one of the things I did when I was involved in the M3 LEP was broker a conversation between the LEP and the wine industry and Sparsholt as part of encouraging Sparsholt to offer support for that industry. And that's a good example of how we can have a joined up impact in terms of supporting change as things go on. Your point about workplaces is well made, and it is one of the big things that's uncertain at the moment, and it, to a certain extent, it pushes us in the direction of having to design for versatility, because we don't know what the answer is going to be, and it's something that we think about a lot in terms of station approach, for example. We know that immediately after the pandemic, as everybody moved to virtual working, that there was a collapse in the number of people in offices. But what we also know is that if you talk to businesses, office-based businesses, they are moving back because they realise that actually virtual does not measure up to human interaction, particularly for training young people, for creating an organisational culture. So that's something where we need to be careful in terms of not just leaping behind the latest fad and assuming that's going to be the same in 5 years' time. We have seen huge change. I mean, in terms of how space and business happens, you saw it earlier with the commuting picture, in terms of movements in and out of the city. You know, we see it with something that was driven to a large degree during the pandemic with the kind of explosion of delivery and new kinds of delivery that weren't really happening before. But also the way that some businesses are managing this sort of thing of having a shop presence and doing delivery at the same time and manage to make that work. So really important challenges that we need to think about and make sure that we're thinking about in the context of the plan and our strategies.
Any other thoughts around the economy? No. I think taking from the presentation we had before, the significant element of small businesses that we have within the district, and whether in terms of the rural aspect, there are more things that can be done to encourage those that are already there, or to actually provide some form of support to start other businesses, because I think, you know, sort of that clearly is an area that within our district is a significant generator of employment and you know, sort of supporting the economy. So what is there, or is there some other things that we can be doing within that regional, that rural economy to make sure that those businesses succeed, and that if there are other ideas that could be generated, that they then are supported to sort of come forward?
I think that's a good challenge. I think we live in a world where there are lots of ways in which businesses can be supported, in terms of you know, in terms of training and advice, and that was one of the topics that was discussed earlier, and the kind of things that are provided through Hampshire's, the services it's taken over from the LEP, from the Growth Hub, for example, and other such things. There are a whole wide range of ways that we can enable things. So, for example, for many years, we've enabled, and that was being touched on earlier, you enable like-minded businesses to get together and talk to each other, and you provide a forum for doing that. You support the establishment of BIDS and other local businesses coming together. And then there's sort of wider things that are useful, like you make sure that the right transport infrastructure is in place. You know, to a certain extent, businesses will find support for themselves in terms of how to grow. One of the things that I think is really important that we don't lose sight of is it is about small businesses, but it's also about how small businesses turn into medium-sized businesses and grow from there. There are some small businesses that are always probably going to be small, but there are other businesses that have great potential to expand. And then often it's about, for example, the relationship with universities, with the research sector, the research side of universities, and how that interacts with new businesses. And also about one of the things that is getting a lot of attention, particularly in northern cities at the moment, is agglomeration effects, where you make it easy for people to come together and do business. And so there, things like our connectivity with the Solent and within the Solent will be incredibly important. You know, the difference between it taking, you know, I don't know, sort of the best part of an hour to get from Portsmouth to Southampton, as opposed to 30 minutes or whatever it might happen to be, how we would enable better transit. Actually, if we look at the outside Winchester for a moment, because Winchester has extremely good transport in the grand scheme of things. It has a motorway, the A34, the main line to London, the main line to Birmingham, and an airport about 10 minutes away. So Winchester generally is pretty good for transport. But if you look at other parts of the district, that's very much not the case. And it's quite striking that as soon as you get onto the south coast, quite how long, you know, and a lot of our district is close to the south coast and relies on those transport connections, how long it takes to get anywhere. So there will be regional things that we need to be doing, and that's you know, we need to be looking at the whole picture and thinking about how we can support our businesses in a way that nobody else is able to do. And I think from our point of view, you heard a lot of it this evening. You know, if there's a lot of thoughts and ideas there inevitably that we would want to see carried over and reflected in our planning for the future. And all the kinds of different initiatives that they do to encourage those sectors and to encourage collaboration between small businesses and training and support for small businesses, all of that is absolutely vital.
Thank you. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, one of the trends, you're talking about how we spot trends, and one of the trends is when people start businesses, because there's so many rules and regulations now, people don't tend to start businesses in their late teens, early 20s. I saw that in our accountancy practice. When I was young and could play football, we had lots of clients of my age. By the time I got to retiring, most of our new clients were doing it as a second or career, leaving other industries. And I think that's one of the big changes that's happened, is the type of people that create business. Like you say, you want businesses that grow, but people who are in their 40s and 50s aren't as ambitious as people in their 20s. And I think it's how do we address and maybe encourage youngsters to start businesses?
I think that's a very good challenge. I mean, you know, one of the things you see a lot of nowadays is you see young people. I mean, the barriers to entry for certain types of businesses have changed a lot. And you see a lot of people using, you know, starting small with things like Etsy or other such things, and these online platforms where they can start running a business as a kind of side hustle. One of the reasons why the market is so important is we have seen some relatively, you know, we've seen young people try things out at the market and make a success of it, and they've been able to do it without the full complexity of, you know, of taking a lease and opening a building. Now, in many cases, they have actually gone on to do that. You know, we were talking about creative spaces earlier, and that's certainly something that's part of the Central Winchester regeneration plans, how we're looking at the use of King's Walk, for example. So I do think, you see it to a certain extent with Hampshire, with farming. There's a reason why they offer county farms. It's to offer young people a way into things. So I do think that we do have a role in that. We have a role as a provider of space. We have a role, again, through encouraging and supporting networking and helping people to come together, sometimes in partnership with our universities, who also do that as well. That there's been conversation earlier. It's all part of the package about making it affordable to live here as well. So there's a whole bunch of things that we can do to make Winchester a better place for young entrepreneurs. And I think that's a good challenge to be looking at for the next 5 years.
I think other things is, we're not careful, we'll end up with not enough people doing ordinary jobs like plastering, woodwork, bricklayers, because basically those industries are all getting very, very old. And I don't know if we have a role in it, but it's certainly plasterers. The average plasterer is well into his 50s, and the average carpenter is not much different. The building sites haven't trained enough young people with the skills that we're going to need to keep going.
Well, I mean, that's one of the bits of feedback we're likely to be giving to the government about their proposed NPPF, which is it's very hard to see how we can have a rapid expansion in construction when we lack planners, we lack people with these construction skills. You're right, in terms of economic development, the skills plan and working with the county on that and supporting that whole process is amazingly important. It isn't just about skills, but you're absolutely right in the sense that some of the ambitions of the government or that we might have are going to run into a wall just because there are not enough people with the skills that are needed to do that work.
Thank you. Councillor Chairman.
Thank you, Chair. I guess mine's go a couple of the previous points. You know, what are the areas of our residents' business tell us we need to improve? The old one from a resident's perspective, going back to, you know, if I think of examples in my ward, we heard earlier on this evening that, you know, nearly 20% of the employees work within wholesale or retail. It is impossible, you know, within the southern parishes to work in a retail job with shifts and travel to your job unless you have a car. You know, public transport just simply does not exist, and therefore the sort of narrowness of opportunities that are available to you are limited pretty much to those within your immediate vicinity, as I say, unless you have a car. So that, I mean, putting together a few of those points, that's the obvious bit of feedback that you hear time and time again is, you know, my opportunities are constrained to what's on my doorstep, you know, given the lack of public transport, unless I'm lucky enough to have a car.
Absolutely, and I when I was at our jobs fair, which dare I say it is another way that we can encourage employment, people to find new things. They had a very good Scooter to Work program, which is designed for young people to help deal with that mobility issue. You know, actually for quite long commutes, if we got serious about cycling infrastructure, then that is also an option that is available to younger people in particular, because you can, you know, you can cycle a decent distance to work. You also need the infrastructure at the other end in terms of showers and other such things, but that does give people more options. But I absolutely agree with you. There is a huge issue with public transport. We are not the Highways Authority, and there are limits to what we can do. But there are new opportunities emerging, potentially through what we hear may be coming in terms of bus policy, and what may be coming through regional you know, sort of devolution deals and the like, which will be looking at transport. And as a minimum, we need to make sure that we continue to advocate for to address the transport needs of rural areas.
Thank you. If we could now move on to Pride in Place, and if there are any things that we could raise and present to Councillor Todd for that aspect of the Councillor Morris.
Yeah, one of the challenges we're going to face in the next 5 years, which isn't actually listed in this document, is the austerity programme which is going to be introduced by Hampshire County Council, which is going to have a direct knock-on effect on the people in Winchester, as Hampshire is forced to reduce road repairs and infrastructure projects. And when it comes to Pride in Place, one sort of direct instance is if they close tips or start charging more, then that may result in an increase in fly tipping. So it's how much are we going to be affected by this, and how much of the slack are we going to be expected to pick up?
The pressure, you know, the pressure that Hampshire is under financially is no secret, and we are already seeing consequences of that. I mean, we were talking about temporary accommodation recently. You know, one of the things that is being discussed at the moment is how we deal with the fallout from the closure of Westview, which is a direct, fairly direct consequence of, or certainly a major influencing factor, has been county council decisions on funding. And you know, we've heard a lot about how the place looks. One of the decisions that's been made is about weed killing and how often that happens. So, you know, there are potholes we hear about, and it's not unique to Hampshire, but it's not great here. And all of those are problems that we will deal with, and there are limits to what we can do to cover for it. I think we need to be careful, despite the fact that legally we have a general power of competence, not to think that we can sit here and take over everything unless there's a very major change to our tax raising powers. But I'm absolutely with you in terms of thinking that we need to find new ways of tackling these things. And indeed, one of the things that we're doing, because we recognise that our financial situation is going to get harder with time, is looking at how we can have positive and constructive relationships with local parishes right across the district, so that between us, we are doing a better job for local residents.
Thank you. Anything else? That's usual.
Thanks, Chairman. Really, the consequences what's going to happen in the next 5 years is our finances are going to dwindle. We're not going to get sufficient money to manage whatever we are delivering today and planning to do it tomorrow or in 5 years' time. How do we make sure that we balance? I mean, it's a tricky situation. It has been going on. Hampshire is facing the problem. We're lucky in terms of managing our budget. We are very secure for the next 2-3 years at least. But a few years down the road, we need to manage that as well. And I'm sure that will be a challenge for us in the coming years. And we need to take some proactive actions on that. I'm sure the leader would have some thoughts on that.
So we face huge uncertainty in terms of local government finance. We don't know what the government is going to announce in later in the year, in November, and we don't know what their long-term plan is for local government finance and what changes there will be. Because of that uncertainty is why we've introduced the TC25 project, which is looking to how we transform our services and find savings in terms of what we're doing by the end of 2025. That's exactly why we've done it. But it's something that isn't mainstreamed within the strategy at the moment. And one of the things that we will be looking to do is to say, actually, that approach, that sort of care with public money, that continuously looking for better value in how we do things and improving how we would cost effectively drive our service needs to become mainstreamed. It needs to be something that we are always effectively working on, because we deal in an uncertain world in terms of our finances. I have some sympathy with the government's point of view that, one of the ways that what we mustn't lose sight of is that it's definitely the case that if our area is thriving, then our finances are better. More people park in our car parks, more new businesses start and end up paying us business rates. And if new homes bonus continues to exist, then, or even if more new homes are built, then there are more people paying council tax. But we do need to be careful about, alongside any upside that there may be, we need to keep a very strong focus on value and cost, and that's not going to go away. If anything, again, I would say it's probably something we need to give bigger focus to in the next 5 years than we did in the last 5.
Councillor White, I think maybe the last question. Thank you.
So there's several village halls, community centres that have said to us that they'd like to be community hubs. They'd like to do more, offer more kind of services locally, access to things. Just wondering how would that come about? How is there a way we can empower communities to, in the face of climate change, in the face of budget cuts, to provide more of a community hub type thing?
We've certainly, through the rural,
Rural Prosperity Fund?
The Rural Prosperity Fund. We have, thank you. Yes, Councillor Thompson, who administers it, has popped out, so I couldn't turn to her. We have already given, we do give money to halls. It's always difficult in the world of, it's always difficult in the world of local government to do anything other than to make long-term promises in terms of revenue funding, but there are things we can do with capital. And maybe one of the challenges we need to put in there, and we're starting to shall we say, play with it, do things with it, with our with parking and with public toilets and other such things, is think about double devolution. So one of the things we should be thinking about is part of our, is this something we need to drive harder? Are there ways in which more can be done on a more local level through parishes and other community groups in order to have better, more locally targeted services than we do currently? And I think there are some things where that's clearly the case and it's something that we should be doing. And there will be other areas where it's harder. But I think we need to, I strongly support finding ways for local communities to be able to have their own successes and make their own mistakes.
Councillor Morris, this has to be the last one because
this is a nice easy question to end on, which is what does success look like in 2030? And whenever there's a sort of a slow news day in the sort of the newspapers, they go, what are the best places to live in England? And Winchester normally comes very, very near the top. And so I think success in 2030 is if Winchester is still coming up in the top 5 best places to live in the UK, that will show that we're on the right track, I think.
I think that's a very uplifting, obviously there are people here from Bishop Saltham who might disagree, but not arguing. No, I think that is a good thing to do. Maybe we need to spread our footprint slightly wider and go, right, we've done the UK now, where else can we compare ourselves to? But yes, I think ultimately, if it is a great place for everybody to live right across the district, that is a very good starting point for us. And if we're doing it in a way that is lessening or reducing our impact on the planet and dealing with the consequences of the previous impact on the planet, then that will be even better. So yes, I think that's a very good target to aim at. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Todd and Simon, for your presentation and contribution. I hope the points raised by the committee are helpful in your deliberations around the council plan, and that you have further productive meetings with the other committees that you are presenting to later this week and into the meeting of next month. So thank you both very much for that. I think, Simon, in view of time, if we move on to the sorry, Matthew, sorry. Getting late. Matthew, thanks, Simon. If we move on to the work programme for next meetings, so I think just really to say that we've got the Disabled Facilities Grant policy review and the HR business plan and budget options coming up at the meeting in November, and actually we've got the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Fund on in February at the moment. But other than that, we'll obviously sort of add things to the programme as we go. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you all for your attendance, and we've also made up for having a missed meeting earlier on in the year by having a double one tonight. So thank you all for your perseverance and attendance here tonight. So thanks again. Meeting closed. Thank you.